Never reveal your full intentions too early. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people become dangerous the moment they fully understand your direction before you have secured your position. The instant you reveal every intention too early, you give others time to study you, emotionally prepare against you, compete with you, or quietly sabotage your progress without you noticing. Human beings are naturally curious, but they are also naturally competitive. Even people who smile at you can secretly feel threatened by your ambition, confidence, or future success. This is why powerful people throughout history learn to move quietly before making their final move visible. The more people know about your plans, the more they begin forming opinions, expectations, doubts, and resistance around them. Some will discourage you subtly. Others will pretend to support you while secretly hoping you fail. Many people cannot handle watching someone evolve beyond the version they feel comfortable controlling. There is also a psychological advantage in mystery. When people cannot fully predict your next step, they pay closer attention to you. Uncertainty creates tension inside the human mind. It makes people curious, cautious, and emotionally invested. The moment you expose everything, however, you remove that tension and hand away your psychological leverage. Manipulators understand this deeply. They rarely show their real motives immediately. They observe first, gather emotional information, and move carefully while everyone else speaks too much. This is why silence can feel unsettling around intelligent people. Sometimes the quietest person in the room already understands everyone else while revealing almost nothing about themselves. Control your emotions. Before others, control them for you. One of the darkest realities about human behavior is that emotional people are the easiest people to control. The moment someone can predict your anger, loneliness, insecurity, jealousy, or desperation, they gain access to your decisions. Most manipulation does not begin with force. It begins with emotional observation. People study what triggers you, what makes you react, what makes you defensive, and what makes you lose control of yourself. This is why emotional discipline feels almost intimidating in social situations. Calm people are difficult to manipulate because they do not immediately reveal what is happening inside them. Their silence creates uncertainty. Their composure removes emotional leverage from others. Meanwhile, impulsive people unknowingly expose their weaknesses every time they react too quickly. Human beings are naturally emotional creatures, but emotions themselves are not the real danger. The danger comes when emotions take control before logic has time to intervene. A single emotional reaction can destroy years of trust, opportunities, relationships, or reputation. This is why highly manipulative people often provoke emotions intentionally. They create confusion, guilt, anger, or fear because emotional minds become easier to influence. The creepiest part is that many people are completely unaware this is happening to them. They think they are freely making decisions, while in reality they are simply reacting emotionally to invisible psychological pressure created by someone else. People who master emotional control often appear mysterious because they do not give others immediate access to their inner world. They pause before reacting. They observe before speaking. They remain calm while others become emotionally chaotic. And in a world where most people are ruled by emotion, emotional self-control quietly becomes a form of power. Silence often creates more power than endless explanation. One of the most unsettling truths about human psychology is that people often lose respect for you the more desperately you try to explain yourself. Endless explanations usually come from fear, the fear of being misunderstood, rejected, judged, or disliked. But the moment people sense emotional desperation behind your words, they unconsciously begin seeing you as weaker, less certain, and easier to influence. Silence, however, creates psychological tension. When someone refuses to immediately defend themselves, overreact, or emotionally chase approval, it forces others to sit alone with uncertainty. Human beings are uncomfortable with uncertainty because the brain constantly seeks closure and answers. This is why silence can feel strangely intimidating. It leaves room for imagination, interpretation, and emotional projection. Powerful people throughout history understood this deeply. They knew that speaking less often increases the weight of every word. Someone who constantly explains themselves appears emotionally exposed, while someone who stays composed and selective with words appears more controlled, observant, and difficult to manipulate. There is also a darker social reality hidden inside silence. Many people are not truly looking for understanding when they question you. They are looking for emotional reactions, weaknesses, inconsistencies, or access to your inner state. The more you explain, the more material you give them to analyze, judge, or use against you later. Manipulators often push people into over-explaining because emotional people reveal themselves very quickly under pressure. Calm silence interrupts that process. It protects emotional leverage. The creepiest part is that silence often makes people reveal more about themselves instead. When faced with quietness, nervous people begin filling the emptiness with unnecessary talking, emotional exposure, and hidden intentions. Sometimes the person saying the least in the room quietly understands everyone else the most. Make people feel important while quietly guiding them. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that most people desperately want to feel significant, valued, and emotionally seen. Beneath confidence, intelligence, status, and pride, there is usually a hidden hunger for validation. People naturally move closer to those who make them feel important because importance creates emotional comfort. It lowers defenses and builds trust faster than logic ever could. This is why highly persuasive people rarely control others through force. Instead, they guide people subtly while making them believe the decisions were entirely their own. The moment someone feels respected, listened to, and emotionally acknowledged, they become far more open to influence without realizing it is happening. Powerful communicators understand this psychological weakness deeply. They let others speak about themselves. They validate opinions carefully. They make people feel intelligent, admired, or emotionally understood. While the other person feels appreciated, the real influence quietly happens underneath the surface. The conversation slowly moves in a direction the guide already intended from the beginning. The unsettling part is that most people cannot detect this when it is done skillfully. Human beings are emotionally drawn toward those who protect their ego. We instinctively trust people who make us feel larger, safer, or more valued. This creates an invisible emotional bond that lowers critical thinking and increases cooperation. Manipulators use this constantly. They flatter carefully, mirror emotions, and feed emotional needs to gain trust before steering situations toward their own advantage. Some people spend years under the influence of someone who never openly controlled them at all. The most dangerous influencers are rarely loud or aggressive. They are calm, attentive, emotionally intelligent, and patient. They quietly study what makes people feel important, then use that emotional doorway to guide behavior without creating resistance. Learn to observe more than you speak. One of the creepiest realities about human behavior is that most people reveal themselves constantly without realizing it. Every facial expression, hesitation, tone shift, nervous habit, forced smile, or emotional reaction quietly exposes information about their thoughts, insecurities, intentions, and emotional state. The problem is that most people are too busy speaking, performing, or trying to be understood to notice any of it. People who observe more than they speak develop an almost unsettling understanding of human nature. Silence gives the brain space to notice patterns others completely miss. You begin recognizing hidden tension in conversations, fake confidence behind loud personalities, jealousy hidden inside compliments, and emotional instability behind forced politeness. Human beings leak truth through behavior long before they reveal it through words. This is why quiet people often make others uncomfortable. Deep observers gather emotional information while revealing very little about themselves in return. That imbalance creates psychological unease. People naturally feel safer when they can predict others, but observers remain difficult to read because they spend more time studying than exposing themselves. There is also power in restraint. The less you speak impulsively, the less emotional information others can use against you. Manipulative people depend on emotional reactions, oversharing, and careless talking to understand where your weaknesses exist. Calm observation protects you from that exposure while allowing you to quietly understand everyone else. The creepiest part is that most people tell you exactly who they are if you remain patient enough to watch. Their patterns eventually betray them. Their emotional reactions expose them. Their treatment of weaker people reveals them. Their envy leaks through subtle behavior. Sometimes the person who says the least in the room is silently collecting the most dangerous knowledge of all. Protect your reputation like a kingdom. One of the harshest truths about society is that people often judge your value long before they truly know you. Your reputation quietly enters rooms before your physical presence does. It shapes how people interpret your words, your mistakes, your success, and even your silence. Once damaged, reputation becomes extremely difficult to fully repair because human beings remember emotional impressions far longer than facts. This is why reputation is not just social image, it is psychological power. A strong reputation creates trust, influence, opportunity, and protection. A weak reputation invites disrespect, suspicion, and silent dismissal. People naturally attach stories to others, and once a story spreads consistently enough, it slowly becomes accepted as reality, even when it is incomplete or false. The unsettling part is how fragile reputation truly is. Years of discipline can be destroyed by one emotional mistake, one public humiliation, one moment of weakness, or one false narrative repeated enough times. Human beings are naturally drawn to gossip because the brain treats social information as survival information. This is why negative stories spread faster than positive ones. Powerful people throughout history understood this deeply. They protected their image carefully, controlled emotional reactions publicly, and avoided unnecessary exposure that could weaken perception. They knew that once people stop respecting your reputation, they slowly stop respecting your authority altogether. Manipulators also understand the terrifying power of reputation. Some destroy reputations intentionally because damaging perception is often easier than defeating someone directly. A single rumor, accusation, or public embarrassment can quietly isolate a person socially, while others distance themselves out of fear or uncertainty. The creepiest part is that many people will smile in front of you while quietly helping negative narratives grow behind your back. This is why emotionally intelligent people become careful about who they trust, what they reveal publicly, and which situations they allow themselves to be associated with. Never outshine powerful people carelessly. One of the darkest realities about power is that many powerful people secretly fear replacement more than failure itself. The moment someone beneath them appears too talented, too admired, too intelligent, or too influential, insecurity quietly begins to grow beneath the surface. Even confident people can become dangerous when they feel their status, authority, or importance is being threatened. This is why openly outshining powerful individuals without awareness can create silent enemies you never expected. Human beings are deeply protective of social hierarchy. When someone suddenly attracts more attention, respect, or admiration than the person above them, it can trigger jealousy disguised as criticism, distance, or punishment. The unsettling part is that this rarely happens openly at first. Powerful people often smile while quietly studying you. They may praise you publicly while emotionally resenting the attention you receive privately. Over time, opportunities disappear, attitudes shift, and invisible resistance begins forming around your progress. History repeatedly shows this pattern. Advisors, generals, employees, artists, and protégés have often suffered not because they lacked talent, but because they displayed it too aggressively around insecure authority figures. Intelligence without social awareness becomes dangerous. Truly strategic people understand that influence must sometimes be revealed gradually. They allow others to feel respected while quietly building their own position behind the scenes. This does not mean becoming weak or hiding your abilities forever. It means understanding emotional timing and human ego before exposing your full strength. Manipulators and socially intelligent individuals know how to shine without making others feel diminished. They share credit carefully, avoid unnecessary arrogance, and make powerful people feel secure rather than threatened. The creepiest part is that some of the biggest obstacles in life are never created by enemies. They are created by insecure people who once admired you until your potential started making them feel small. Become useful enough that people fear losing you. One of the harshest truths about human relationships is that many people do not truly value others until they recognize what life feels like without them. Human beings are deeply driven by emotional comfort, convenience, and personal benefit. The more value you quietly provide, the more psychologically difficult it becomes for others to imagine replacing you. This creates a hidden form of influence that most people never fully understand. Useful people are remembered differently. They solve problems. They bring emotional stability, knowledge, opportunities, calmness, protection, or support that others slowly become dependent on. Over time, this usefulness creates invisible attachment. People may not openly admit it, but they begin fearing the absence of someone who improves their life consistently. This is why highly influential individuals focus less on seeking attention and more on becoming irreplaceable. Attention creates temporary interest, but usefulness creates long-term psychological dependence. Someone who provides rare value quietly gains leverage without needing to demand loyalty or control directly. The disturbing part is that people often treat others carelessly until the possibility of losing them becomes real. Familiarity blinds people to value, but once absence appears, panic, regret, and emotional realization suddenly emerge. Human psychology reacts strongly to loss because the brain fears losing comfort more than it values gaining something new. Manipulative people understand this deeply. Some intentionally position themselves as emotional rescuers, advisors, providers, or protectors, so others slowly become attached to their presence. Once dependence forms, influence becomes much easier. The creepiest part is that the strongest form of power is often invisible. When people secretly fear losing your presence, opportunities, emotional support, or value, they begin treating you differently without fully understanding why. Quiet usefulness can slowly become stronger than loud authority. Master patience, while others rush emotionally. One of the darkest truths about human psychology is that most people destroy themselves emotionally long before life ever destroys them physically. Human beings are naturally impatient creatures. When emotions become intense, anger, fear, loneliness, excitement, jealousy, desperation, people crave immediate action because waiting feels psychologically painful. The emotional brain wants relief now, even if the decision creates long-term damage later. This is why patience quietly becomes a terrifying form of power. Patient people are difficult to manipulate because they do not react impulsively under emotional pressure, while others panic, overshare, chase, argue, beg, or make reckless decisions. Patient people remain emotionally still long enough to see what is really happening beneath the surface. Manipulators understand how dangerous patience is, which is why they often create urgency intentionally. They pressure people emotionally to force rushed decisions before logic has time to intervene. Fear, guilt, excitement, and anxiety become tools used to bypass rational thinking. The faster someone reacts emotionally, the easier they become to influence. The unsettling part is that impatience often exposes hidden weakness. People who cannot wait usually reveal emotional dependency, insecurity, desperation, or fear of losing control. Calm patience, however, creates mystery. It signals emotional discipline and inner stability. When someone refuses to emotionally rush, others begin feeling uncertain because they can no longer predict or control the reaction. There is also something psychologically intimidating about people who remain calm while everyone else becomes chaotic. Patience creates emotional contrast. It makes emotional people expose themselves more clearly while the patient person quietly gathers information and maintains control. The creepiest part is that life often rewards the person who can stay emotionally composed just a little longer than everyone else around them. Keep your private life strategically hidden. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that the more people know about your private life, the easier it becomes for them to emotionally study, predict, and influence you. Information creates psychological access. Every detail you reveal, your fears, relationships, habits, struggles, dreams, or weaknesses, slowly gives others pieces of your emotional blueprint. Most people do not realize how much power they hand away simply by oversharing. Human beings are naturally curious about what is hidden, but curiosity is not always innocent. Some people gather personal information to compare themselves, some to gossip, some to judge, and others to quietly gain leverage. Even supportive people can unintentionally expose your vulnerabilities later during conflict, jealousy, or emotional distance. This is why highly intelligent individuals often become extremely protective of their inner world. They understand that privacy is not secrecy born from fear. It is emotional self-protection. The less people know about your personal life, the harder it becomes for them to manipulate your emotions, attack your weaknesses, or interfere with your direction. There is also a strange psychological power in mystery. People become unsettled when they cannot fully figure someone out. In a world where most people constantly expose themselves online, emotionally disciplined privacy feels rare and intimidating. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty naturally commands attention. Manipulators understand this deeply. They often ask personal questions early, pretending it is harmless curiosity, while quietly studying emotional triggers, insecurities, and patterns they may later use for influence. Some people only reveal themselves gradually because they know emotional access should be earned, not freely given. The unsettling part is that once private information spreads, you lose control over how it is interpreted. People reshape your story through their own emotions, biases, and hidden intentions. Sometimes, silence protects your peace more than honesty ever will. Make people depend on your value. Slowly. One of the creepiest truths about human attachment is that dependency rarely happens suddenly. It grows quietly, almost invisibly, through repeated emotional comfort, usefulness, consistency, or support. Human beings naturally become attached to whatever repeatedly solves their problems, eases their stress, or fills emotional gaps in their lives. Over time, what once felt optional slowly begins to feel necessary. This is why highly influential people rarely force control immediately. They understand that the strongest form of influence is gradual dependency. The more valuable you become in someone's emotional, social, or professional world, the harder it becomes for them to imagine functioning without you. This dependency can be emotional, psychological, financial, or even intellectual. The disturbing part is that most people never notice when this process begins. It often starts with small things, being the person who always listens, always helps, always understands, or always provides solutions. Slowly, your presence becomes associated with stability, relief, or comfort. Once the brain links someone to emotional safety, separation begins to feel uncomfortable. Powerful individuals throughout history understood this deeply. They made themselves indispensable before exercising real influence. Instead of demanding loyalty directly, they created conditions where people emotionally relied on them first. Manipulators use this technique constantly. They offer attention, validation, guidance, or support in ways that feel genuine at first. But over time, the relationship becomes unbalanced. The victim slowly loses emotional independence without realizing it, because the dependency developed gradually rather than forcefully. The most psychologically dangerous part is that dependency often disguises itself as love, friendship, trust, or admiration. People believe they simply need someone emotionally, while underneath, invisible psychological conditioning has already taken place. Those who understand human nature know that lasting influence is rarely built through force. It is built by becoming emotionally difficult to replace. Never beg for attention, loyalty, or respect. One of the coldest truths about human psychology is that the moment you begin begging for attention, loyalty, or respect, people subconsciously start valuing you less. Human beings are strangely drawn toward what appears emotionally secure and naturally respected. Desperation, however, creates the opposite effect. It signals emotional dependence, insecurity, and fear of rejection, even when the words themselves sound harmless. This is why emotionally strong people rarely chase validation openly. They understand that real respect cannot be forced through pleading, over-explaining, or constantly trying to prove worth. The harder someone fights for approval, the more others begin sensing emotional imbalance beneath the surface. Attention is especially dangerous because it can become addictive. Once people rely on constant recognition to feel valuable, they slowly hand emotional control to others. Their mood begins depending on replies, praise, inclusion, compliments, or external validation. This creates a hidden vulnerability that manipulative people notice immediately. Loyalty works the same way. Genuine loyalty is given freely through trust, consistency, and shared experiences. The moment loyalty must be begged for, guilted out of people, or emotionally forced, it is no longer real loyalty at all. It becomes obligation, fear, or temporary performance. The unsettling part is that some people intentionally withhold attention or respect because they know emotional reactions create power. They study who becomes desperate, who chases harder, who over-explains, and who loses emotional composure when ignored. Silence and distance become psychological tests. People who stop begging often appear intimidating because they become emotionally difficult to control. They accept rejection without collapsing. They walk away from disrespect quietly. They understand that forced validation is worthless. And in a world where many people crave constant approval, emotional self-respect quietly becomes rare power. Stay calm. When others try to provoke you. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that many people intentionally provoke emotions to gain control over others. Provocation is rarely random. Sometimes people insult, disrespect, mock, ignore, criticize, or challenge you, not because they are strong, but because they want to pull you into emotional chaos where they feel more powerful. The moment you lose control emotionally, they gain access to your focus, your reactions, and often your decision-making. This is why calmness becomes deeply unsettling to emotionally manipulative people. When someone expects anger, defensiveness, or emotional collapse, and instead meets silence or composure, it disrupts the psychological control they were trying to create. Calmness removes the reward they were hoping to receive. Human beings naturally reveal themselves during emotional conflict. Some people provoke because they are insecure. Others provoke because they crave attention, dominance, or emotional validation. And some simply enjoy watching others lose control because it distracts from their own inner instability. The frightening part is that emotional reactions often expose more weakness than the original insult ever did. Manipulators understand this deeply. They know that once emotions take over, logic becomes weaker. Angry people speak carelessly. Defensive people over-explain. Hurt people reveal insecurities. Emotional people become easier to predict and easier to influence. Staying calm does not mean feeling nothing. It means refusing to hand your emotional state to someone else. Calm people observe before reacting. They understand that not every insult deserves access to their peace. This creates psychological strength because emotional restraint is difficult for most people to maintain under pressure. The creepiest part is that calmness often frustrates manipulators more than anger ever could. When they cannot control your emotions, they begin losing control of themselves instead. Understand people's hidden motivations before trusting them. One of the darkest truths about human nature is that people rarely reveal their real intentions immediately. Most human interaction operates beneath the surface, hidden behind politeness, charm, friendliness, or emotional performance. What people say they want and what they actually want are often completely different things. This is why blindly trusting words alone can become dangerously naive. Human beings are driven by hidden emotional needs: validation, control, attention, security, power, jealousy, loneliness, status, or personal gain. Many people themselves are not fully conscious of these motivations, yet those hidden desires quietly shape their behavior, decisions, and relationships. Someone may appear supportive while secretly competing with you. Another may seem caring while actually fearing abandonment and trying to control access to you emotionally. The unsettling part is that manipulative people are often highly skilled at disguising their motives. They study personalities carefully, mirror values, and present themselves as trustworthy long before revealing their true nature. This is why emotionally intelligent people pay more attention to patterns than promises. Consistent behavior reveals far more than emotional words ever will. There is also a psychological reason trust feels dangerous in the modern world. Once people understand your emotional needs, they gain access to your vulnerabilities. A person who knows what you fear, what you crave, or what you desperately want can quietly shape your emotions without you realizing it. This is how many toxic relationships begin, not through force, but through carefully studied emotional influence. Powerful observers understand that hidden motivations eventually leak through small behaviors. Envy appears through subtle negativity. Control appears through guilt. Self-interest appears during difficult moments. True character often reveals itself when people no longer benefit from pretending. The creepiest part is realizing how many people wear emotional masks daily, adapting their personality depending on what they want from the person standing in front of them. Let actions speak louder than promises. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that words are incredibly easy to manufacture. People can promise loyalty while planning betrayal, speak kindly while secretly resenting you, or swear commitment while already preparing to leave. Human beings are emotional storytellers, and many people learn very early how to use words to create comfort, trust, and illusion without ever intending to follow through. This is why intelligent people eventually stop listening to promises and start studying patterns instead. Patterns reveal what words try to hide. Someone's real intentions are exposed through consistency, effort, timing, sacrifice, and behavior under pressure, not through emotional speeches or beautiful explanations. The disturbing part is how easily people become hypnotized by language. A convincing voice, emotional reassurance, or repeated promises can temporarily override logic. This is exactly why manipulators rely so heavily on words. They understand that emotionally vulnerable people often trust what feels good before verifying what is real. Actions, however, are much harder to fake over time. Real loyalty repeats itself consistently. Genuine respect appears in behavior even when nobody is watching. Honest intentions survive difficult situations. While words can change overnight, repeated actions slowly expose someone's true character, whether they want it revealed or not. There is also power in becoming someone whose actions speak quietly for them. People who constantly announce their goodness, loyalty, or ambitions often seek validation more than truth. Truly disciplined individuals move differently. They build, help, protect, improve, and remain consistent without needing endless recognition. The creepiest part is that many dangerous people know exactly what others want to hear emotionally. They study emotional weaknesses and craft words carefully around them. This is why trusting promises blindly can become psychologically dangerous. Over time, actions always reveal the reality that words were trying to control. Never reveal every weakness to emotional manipulators. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that not everyone listens to understand you. Some people listen to study you. Emotional manipulators pay close attention to insecurities, fears, loneliness, trauma, guilt, and emotional wounds, because hidden weaknesses often become the easiest doorway into controlling someone later. What feels like emotional openness to you can quietly become psychological information to them. This is why emotionally intelligent manipulators rarely attack directly at first. They create comfort, safety, and trust before gathering emotional details slowly over time. They notice what hurts you most, what triggers shame, what makes you seek approval, and what causes emotional reactions. Once they understand your weak points, they can influence your decisions with frightening precision. Human beings naturally crave connection, which is why oversharing can feel emotionally relieving in the moment. But the dangerous part is that vulnerable information cannot be taken back once revealed. Some people store emotional details quietly and use them later during arguments, manipulation, guilt, betrayal, or emotional control. The darkest manipulators often disguise themselves as deeply caring people in the beginning. They mirror emotions, validate pain, and create the illusion of emotional safety. But over time, the same vulnerabilities you shared honestly may suddenly become weapons used against you. Your fears become pressure points. Your insecurities become leverage. Your emotional needs become chains. This does not mean becoming cold, emotionless, or incapable of trust. It means understanding that trust should be earned slowly, not handed out recklessly. Emotionally disciplined people reveal themselves carefully because they understand human nature deeply. The unsettling reality is that some people are not searching for connection at all. They are searching for access, and the more emotional access they gain, the easier it becomes for them to shape your emotions, decisions, and sense of self without you fully noticing it. Learn the power of strategic absence. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people often fail to appreciate something fully until they feel its absence. Human beings are strangely drawn toward what becomes emotionally unavailable, distant, or difficult to access. Constant presence creates familiarity, and familiarity often slowly weakens emotional impact. But absence creates uncertainty, curiosity, and psychological tension. This is why strategic absence can become a powerful form of influence. When someone is always available, always responding, always explaining, and always emotionally present, people eventually begin expecting that access without valuing it. But the moment that presence disappears, the emotional atmosphere changes. Suddenly, people begin noticing the silence, the missing energy, the emotional gap that was once filling space around them. The human mind naturally obsesses over unfinished emotional patterns. When someone pulls away calmly instead of chasing attention or validation, it creates unanswered questions inside others. People begin wondering what changed, where your attention went, or whether they misjudged your importance. Mystery begins replacing certainty, and certainty is something the human brain desperately craves. Manipulators understand this deeply. They know that intermittent attention often creates stronger emotional attachment than constant availability. This is why emotionally confusing relationships can become psychologically addictive. The inconsistency keeps people emotionally focused, constantly seeking reassurance and emotional closure. However, strategic absence is not only about manipulation, it is also about protecting your value, emotional energy, and mental clarity. Distance allows observation. Silence reveals who truly reaches out and who only enjoyed convenience. Absence exposes emotional dependency, hidden intentions, and shallow loyalty far more clearly than constant closeness ever could. The creepiest part is that sometimes your disappearance teaches people your value more effectively than your presence ever did. In many situations, people only fully recognize your emotional impact after they no longer have automatic access to it. Make your confidence feel natural, not forced. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people can often sense fake confidence long before words expose it. Forced confidence usually carries hidden tension beneath it. It feels loud, performative, overly defensive, or desperate for validation. Real confidence, however, feels calm. It does not constantly need attention, approval, or emotional reassurance because it is rooted in self-control rather than performance. Human beings subconsciously study emotional energy more than they realize. This is why forced confidence often creates discomfort in social situations. Someone who constantly tries to appear dominant, impressive, or superior usually reveals hidden insecurity underneath the surface. The louder the need to prove power, the more people quietly suspect weakness behind it. Natural confidence works differently. It feels relaxed because it does not fear judgment constantly. A naturally confident person speaks without rushing, listens without panic, and stays emotionally composed even when challenged. Their behavior creates a strange psychological effect because calmness itself signals inner stability. In a world filled with emotional performance, genuine calm becomes intimidating. The unsettling part is that manipulative people understand this deeply. Many learn how to imitate confidence externally through posture, eye contact, speech patterns, and social dominance while hiding insecurity internally. Some become experts at manufacturing charisma to gain trust, attraction, or influence over others. This is why emotionally intelligent people pay attention to consistency rather than appearance alone. Real confidence remains steady across different environments. It does not collapse under criticism or disappear when attention fades. The creepiest part is realizing that the most powerful people in a room are often not the loudest ones. Sometimes the person who speaks the least, reacts the least, and seeks the least validation quietly controls the emotional atmosphere without anyone fully understanding why. Avoid arguing with emotional fools publicly. One of the most dangerous mistakes intelligent people make is assuming every argument is actually about truth. In reality, many emotional people are not trying to understand, learn, or solve anything at all. They are trying to win emotionally, protect their ego, release frustration, or pull someone else into chaos with them. The moment you engage publicly with someone ruled entirely by emotion, the conversation usually stops being rational and starts becoming psychological warfare. This is why arguing with emotional fools often damages both people involved. Emotional individuals thrive on reactions. The more calm people explain themselves, defend themselves, or try to reason logically, the more emotionally charged the other person becomes. Public conflict also changes human behavior because pride and social image become involved. Once people feel embarrassed, exposed, or challenged in front of others, their need to win often becomes stronger than their desire for truth. The creepiest part is that emotional chaos is contagious. Human beings unconsciously absorb the emotional energy around them. This means that even calm individuals can slowly become reactive, defensive, and irrational when trapped inside prolonged emotional conflict. Manipulative people understand this deeply. They provoke publicly because public reactions reveal weaknesses quickly. Powerful people throughout history often avoided unnecessary public arguments for this exact reason. They understood that emotional control is more valuable than proving intelligence to unstable people. Silence, restraint, and strategic disengagement often protect reputation far more effectively than endless explanation. There is also a brutal social reality hidden inside public arguments. Observers rarely analyze who is logically correct. Most people simply remember who appeared calmer, more composed, and emotionally in control. Sometimes the smartest person in the room is not the one speaking the most. It is the one who recognizes when a conversation has already become emotionally useless and quietly walks away before chaos spreads further. Always maintain emotional leverage in conversations. One of the most disturbing realities about human interaction is that every conversation carries invisible emotional power beneath the words themselves. People are constantly reading reactions, confidence levels, insecurities, emotional needs, and psychological weaknesses without even realizing they are doing it. The person who loses emotional control first often loses influence first. Emotional leverage is the ability to remain psychologically steady while others become emotionally exposed. It means staying calm when someone tries to provoke you, guilt you, pressure you, or emotionally corner you. The moment you become overly reactive, desperate to be understood, or emotionally defensive, you begin handing control of the interaction to the other person. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals often appear intimidating in conversations. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not panic when misunderstood. They observe carefully before reacting. Their calmness creates uncertainty because emotionally impulsive people expect predictable reactions they can control. Manipulators understand emotional leverage extremely well. They intentionally create tension, confusion, guilt, or emotional discomfort to push others into reactive states. Once someone becomes emotional, they usually speak too much, reveal weaknesses, make poor decisions, or lose composure. Emotional pressure becomes a tool for extracting information and shifting power. The creepiest part is that many people never notice when this is happening to them. They think they are simply having a conversation, while invisible psychological dynamics quietly shape the interaction underneath. Maintaining emotional leverage does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means refusing to let emotions control your behavior in real time. It means protecting your inner state instead of giving everyone immediate emotional access to it. People who master this skill often seem mysterious because they cannot easily be emotionally pulled, shaken, or manipulated. In a world where most people react instantly, emotional control quietly becomes a form of social power. People respect restraint more than desperation. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that desperation quietly changes the way people see you. The moment someone appears emotionally needy, overly eager, or afraid to lose attention, others subconsciously begin feeling less respect toward them. Human beings are strangely sensitive to emotional imbalance. We can often sense when someone is chasing validation, approval, affection, or control too intensely, even when they try to hide it. Desperation creates psychological pressure. It feels heavy, unpredictable, and emotionally unstable. Whether in relationships, friendships, business, or social situations, people naturally pull away from energy that feels overly dependent or emotionally hungry. The unsettling part is that the more desperate someone becomes for attention or reassurance, the more likely they are to lose the very thing they are trying to keep. Restraint, however, creates the opposite effect. Calm restraint signals emotional stability and self-control. When someone does not immediately react, beg, overshare, or chase validation, they appear more secure within themselves. This emotional discipline creates mystery because people cannot easily predict or emotionally control them. Manipulators understand this deeply. They often test emotional restraint by creating distance, mixed signals, or subtle rejection to observe how someone reacts. Emotional people usually expose themselves quickly. They over-pursue, over-explain, or emotionally collapse under uncertainty. Restrained people remain calm enough to observe the situation before responding. There is also something psychologically intimidating about people who can walk away without emotional chaos. It suggests inner strength and self-respect. Human beings often respect those who can maintain dignity under emotional pressure because most people struggle to do it themselves. The creepiest part is that restraint silently shifts power dynamics. The person who can control emotional impulses usually becomes far harder to manipulate, replace, or emotionally dominate. Become unpredictable, enough to remain interesting. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that predictability slowly makes people emotionally invisible. The human brain is naturally drawn toward uncertainty because uncertainty creates tension, curiosity, and emotional attention. Once people feel they have completely figured you out, their excitement, caution, and fascination often begin to fade. Familiarity creates comfort, but too much predictability can quietly destroy intrigue. This is why emotionally intelligent people rarely reveal every layer of themselves at once. They understand that mystery keeps people psychologically engaged. When your reactions, thoughts, habits, and emotional patterns become impossible to fully predict, others unconsciously pay closer attention to you. The brain starts searching for answers, trying to understand what cannot be easily controlled or categorized. Unpredictability also creates psychological power. People feel safer around individuals they can easily read and emotionally manipulate. But someone who remains calm in situations where anger is expected, disappears when attention is demanded, or changes direction unexpectedly becomes much harder to influence. Uncertainty forces people to stay mentally alert around you. The unsettling part is that highly manipulative individuals use unpredictability strategically. Some alternate between warmth and distance, attention and silence, praise and emotional withdrawal to create emotional confusion in others. The human mind becomes addicted to trying to regain certainty, which strengthens emotional attachment even further. Natural unpredictability, however, is different from emotional chaos. It does not mean becoming unstable or fake. It means refusing to become emotionally repetitive, overly available, or completely transparent. It means protecting parts of yourself from becoming fully understood too quickly. The creepiest part is that people are often most obsessed with what they cannot fully explain. The moment someone feels there is still something hidden beneath your surface, their curiosity keeps pulling them back toward you without them even realizing why. Never chase people who enjoy your pursuit too much. One of the creepiest truths about human relationships is that some people do not enjoy love, attention, or loyalty nearly as much as they enjoy control. They become emotionally addicted to being pursued because pursuit feeds their ego, insecurity, and need for validation. The more effort someone gives them, the more powerful they feel. In these situations, the chase itself becomes more important to them than genuine connection. This is why certain people constantly create emotional distance without fully leaving. They reply inconsistently, send mixed signals, disappear and return unexpectedly, or give just enough attention to keep hope alive. The uncertainty keeps the other person emotionally attached because the human brain becomes obsessed with inconsistent rewards. Psychologically, unpredictability creates stronger emotional addiction than stability. The disturbing part is that many people mistake this emotional tension for deep attraction or destiny. In reality, they are often trapped inside a cycle of emotional manipulation where their self-worth slowly becomes tied to gaining approval from someone emotionally unavailable. Manipulators understand this pattern extremely well. They know that when someone starts chasing emotionally, logic weakens. The chasing person begins overthinking, over-explaining, sacrificing boundaries, and tolerating disrespect they normally would never accept. Emotional pursuit slowly shifts the balance of power. People who genuinely value you rarely enjoy watching you suffer for their attention. Real connection creates safety, consistency, and mutual effort, not endless emotional confusion. Someone who constantly enjoys your pursuit without offering clarity often enjoys the emotional control more than the relationship itself. The creepiest part is that emotionally unavailable people sometimes become less interested the moment they are finally fully won. The chase gave them emotional stimulation, validation, and power. Once certainty arrives, the excitement disappears because it was never truly about love in the first place. Protect your time from entitled people. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that many people do not respect your time unless you force them to. Entitled individuals often believe they deserve unlimited access to your energy, attention, emotional support, and availability simply because you have been kind to them before. The more accessible you become without boundaries, the more some people unconsciously begin treating your time as something cheap and endlessly available. Human beings naturally value what feels limited. This is why people often respect busy, disciplined, and emotionally unavailable individuals more than those who are constantly available for everyone. Unlimited access slowly destroys perceived value because familiarity makes people forget the sacrifice behind your attention and effort. Entitled people rarely announce themselves openly at first. Instead, they slowly consume your mental space through constant interruptions, emotional dumping, unnecessary demands, guilt manipulation, or expectations that your life should revolve around their needs. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion that quietly drains ambition, focus, peace, and personal growth. The disturbing part is that many manipulators intentionally test boundaries to see how much access they can gain. They notice who struggles to say no, who fears disappointing others, and who sacrifices their own priorities to avoid conflict. Once they detect weak boundaries, the demands usually increase little by little. Emotionally disciplined people understand that protecting time is actually protecting life itself. Every hour wasted on emotionally draining people is an hour stolen from goals, healing, creativity, peace, and meaningful relationships. People who strongly protect their time often appear cold or distant because society pressures individuals to constantly sacrifice themselves for others. But the truth is darker than most realize. Some people are not looking for connection at all. They are looking for access, convenience, and emotional control disguised as closeness. Learn how to disappear from toxic environments quietly. One of the creepiest truths about toxic environments is that they often do not trap people physically first. They trap them emotionally. Toxic people slowly condition others to stay through guilt, fear, emotional exhaustion, manipulation, or psychological dependency. Over time, constant stress starts feeling normal, and many people do not even realize how much of their peace has quietly disappeared until they finally step away. This is why leaving toxic environments quietly can become an act of psychological survival. Loud exits often create more emotional chaos, retaliation, and manipulation. Toxic people usually feed on emotional reactions because reactions give them continued access to your energy. Arguments, dramatic explanations, and emotional confrontations often keep the unhealthy connection alive much longer than necessary. Quiet disappearance, however, removes emotional fuel. Instead of fighting endlessly to be understood, calm distance slowly weakens the toxic dynamic itself. You stop explaining every decision. You stop reacting to every provocation. You stop giving people unlimited emotional access to your mind. The silence becomes unsettling because toxic individuals often rely on constant emotional engagement to maintain influence. There is also something deeply revealing about distance. The moment you quietly step back, people begin exposing their true intentions. Some will respect your boundaries. Others will become angry simply because they lost control over your attention and emotional availability. The frightening part is that certain people never truly valued your happiness. They only valued your accessibility. Manipulators hate silent detachment because it gives them fewer emotional openings to exploit. Calm withdrawal forces them to lose visibility into your thoughts, plans, and emotional state. And for controlling people, uncertainty feels threatening. The creepiest part is that many toxic environments only reveal how unhealthy they truly were after you finally experience peace without them. Study human nature more than human words. One of the darkest truths about human behavior is that words are often the least reliable part of a person. Human beings constantly say things they do not fully mean, fully understand, or fully believe. People lie to protect themselves, to gain approval, to avoid conflict, to manipulate perception, or sometimes simply because they are confused about their own emotions. This is why emotionally intelligent individuals learn to study patterns, reactions, and behavior far more carefully than speech alone. Human nature always leaks through actions eventually. Someone may claim loyalty while disappearing during difficult moments. Another may speak kindly while secretly competing with you underneath the surface. Words are easy because they cost almost nothing. Behavior, however, exposes true priorities, hidden fears, insecurities, and emotional intentions. The unsettling part is that many people become emotionally trapped because they fall in love with language instead of reality. They trust promises more than consistency. They believe explanations more than patterns. Manipulators understand this weakness deeply. They know emotionally vulnerable people often want comforting words so badly that they ignore obvious behavioral contradictions. This is why powerful observers focus on small details others miss. They study how people behave under stress, how they treat powerless individuals, how they react to success they did not create, and how their personality changes depending on who is watching. Human nature becomes most visible when people stop performing carefully. There is also a creepy psychological reality hidden inside observation. Most people think they are hiding themselves far better than they actually are. Jealousy leaks through tone. Insecurity leaks through defensiveness. Control leaks through guilt. Desperation leaks through attention-seeking. The more you study human nature, the more you realize that behavior silently tells the truth long before words ever do. Sometimes a person's smallest reaction reveals more than their longest explanation. Keep your standards private, but uncompromising. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that the moment you openly announce your standards, boundaries, or expectations to everyone, some people immediately begin looking for ways to challenge them. Human beings are naturally curious about limits, and insecure people often feel strangely threatened by those who quietly refuse to tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or low behavior. This is why powerful individuals rarely advertise every personal rule they live by. They do not constantly warn people about their boundaries or seek validation for their standards. Instead, they observe quietly and allow actions to reveal who deserves access to them. Their standards remain firm, but they are enforced through behavior rather than endless explanation. The disturbing part is that many people reveal their standards emotionally, especially when they fear rejection. They repeatedly announce what they will never tolerate, what they deserve, or how valuable they are, hoping others will respect them more. But manipulators often study these emotional declarations carefully. The more emotionally reactive someone becomes about their standards, the easier it becomes to identify insecurities hidden underneath. True standards are not performances. They are quiet decisions that remain consistent even when loneliness, attraction, pressure, or emotional temptation appear. This is where most people fail. Many claim to have boundaries until emotions become involved. Then fear of losing someone slowly weakens their self-respect. People with real standards move differently. They do not argue endlessly, beg for understanding, or repeatedly explain their worth. When crossed, they simply reduce access, create distance, or walk away calmly. The creepiest part is that emotionally disciplined people often appear mysterious because they reveal very little while tolerating even less. Others keep testing them emotionally, expecting negotiation or weakness, only to realize too late that the standards were never flexible to begin with. Most people reveal themselves through patterns, not statements. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people often tell you who they are long before you are emotionally ready to believe it. The problem is that most individuals listen more to words than behavior. Human beings are naturally drawn to promises, apologies, compliments, and emotional explanations because words create hope, but patterns reveal reality. Anyone can say they are loyal, honest, caring, or trustworthy. Words are easy. Patterns are much harder to fake because repeated behavior eventually exposes true intentions, emotional habits, and character. The way someone treats people consistently over time reveals far more than emotional speeches ever will. This is why emotionally intelligent people study repetition carefully. They notice how someone behaves under stress, disappointment, jealousy, anger, success, or temptation. They observe how often someone lies, disappears, manipulates, avoids accountability, breaks promises, or changes personalities depending on who they are around. Human behavior always leaves trails. The disturbing part is that many manipulative people survive through temporary performances. They become whoever they need to be in the moment to gain trust, affection, sympathy, or control. But maintaining fake behavior forever is psychologically exhausting. Eventually, cracks appear. The same toxic habits repeat themselves in cycles. People often ignore patterns because emotions create denial. The brain wants comfort more than truth. This is why many individuals continue trusting people who repeatedly hurt them, betray them, or disappoint them. They focus on isolated moments instead of recurring behavior. The creepiest part is that patterns quietly predict the future. Someone who constantly lies under pressure will likely lie again. Someone who repeatedly manipulates emotions will continue doing it. Human beings change slowly, but patterns expose who they truly are beneath temporary emotions, charm, and carefully crafted words. Never let temporary emotions destroy long-term positioning. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how quickly temporary emotions can destroy years of careful progress. A single emotional moment, anger, jealousy, loneliness, pride, humiliation, excitement, or revenge, can permanently damage relationships, reputations, opportunities, and trust that took years to build. The frightening part is that most people realize the consequences only after the emotion has already faded. Human emotions are powerful, but they are also temporary. What feels unbearable in one moment often loses intensity with time. Yet many people make permanent decisions inside temporary emotional storms. They quit impulsively, expose secrets recklessly, destroy valuable connections, send emotional messages they later regret, or react publicly in ways that permanently reshape how others perceive them. This is why emotional self-control becomes a form of long-term intelligence. People who understand positioning think beyond immediate emotional relief. They recognize that not every insult deserves retaliation, not every betrayal deserves emotional exposure, and not every emotional urge deserves action. Sometimes protecting your future matters more than satisfying your emotions in the present moment. Manipulators understand this deeply. They intentionally create emotional pressure because emotional people become easier to destabilize. Anger clouds judgment. Fear weakens logic. Desperation creates impulsiveness. Once emotions take over, people often sabotage themselves without realizing someone else quietly triggered the reaction intentionally. There is also something psychologically powerful about people who can remain focused on long-term outcomes while others become emotionally reactive. Calm individuals protect opportunities quietly, while emotional people often burn bridges publicly. The creepiest part is that many people never lose because of lack of talent, intelligence, or potential. They lose because they allowed one temporary emotional moment to destroy a position that could have changed their entire future forever. Attention is power. When used carefully, one of the creepiest truths about modern society is that attention has become one of the most valuable forms of power on earth. Wherever human attention goes, influence follows. People fight for attention constantly through social media, status, appearance, drama, opinions, relationships, and emotional reactions. Most people do not realize they are competing for psychological visibility every single day. Attention shapes perception. The more attention something receives, the more important the human brain automatically assumes it must be. This is why emotionally intelligent people become extremely careful about where they place their focus and who they allow access to theirs. Attention is emotional energy, and whatever consistently receives it slowly gains influence over your thoughts, emotions, and decisions. The unsettling part is that many manipulative individuals understand this deeply. They provoke reactions intentionally because even negative attention creates psychological control. Anger, obsession, outrage, and emotional fixation all keep someone mentally attached. The moment a person can dominate your attention, they begin quietly occupying space inside your emotional world. There is also a strange psychological power in selective attention. people naturally become more intrigued by what feels limited, difficult to access, or emotionally unavailable. Someone who constantly seeks validation loses value quickly because unlimited access removes tension and mystery. But someone who controls their attention carefully appears more disciplined, emotionally stable, and psychologically valuable. Powerful people throughout history understood this principle well. They avoided wasting emotional energy reacting to everything around them. They knew attention scattered everywhere creates weakness, while focused attention creates influence. The creepiest part is realizing how easily human attention can be manipulated. Entire industries, relationships, and systems are built around keeping people emotionally distracted long enough to shape behavior. Most people believe they are controlling their attention freely, while invisible forces quietly compete every day to control what they think about, fear, desire, and emotionally chase. Learn to say less. During emotional conflicts. One of the creepiest truths about emotional conflict is that people often reveal their deepest weaknesses while trying to defend themselves. The moment emotions rise, fear takes control of the mind. People begin speaking impulsively, over-explaining, exposing insecurities, revealing private information, or saying things they later regret. Emotional conflict turns many intelligent people careless because emotion temporarily weakens self-control. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals learn to speak less when tension becomes intense. Silence during conflict is unsettling because it interrupts emotional chaos. Most people expect immediate reactions, defensive explanations, or emotional explosions. When someone remains calm and selective with words instead, it creates uncertainty. Uncertainty makes emotional people uncomfortable because they lose the ability to predict or control the conversation. The disturbing part is that many arguments are not actually about solving problems. They are emotional fishing attempts. Some people provoke conflict specifically to extract reactions, weaknesses, guilt, or emotional confessions. The more emotionally reactive someone becomes, the more psychological information they expose without realizing it. Manipulative individuals understand this deeply. They often stay emotionally detached while the other person loses control, because emotional people become easier to guide, confuse, or discredit publicly. Once someone starts speaking excessively during anger, sadness, or fear, they usually begin losing strategic control of the interaction. Saying less during emotional conflict also forces observation. Calm people notice body language, tone changes, contradictions, and emotional intentions that reactive people completely miss. Silence creates mental space for awareness, while emotional chaos destroys it. The creepiest part is that silence often affects the other person more than any argument could. Many people become increasingly uncomfortable when they cannot provoke emotional reactions. Without emotional access to you, they lose psychological leverage. Sometimes the strongest response during conflict is not winning the argument at all, but refusing to emotionally expose yourself inside it. People trust confidence more than over-explanation. One of the strangest truths about human psychology is that people often believe certainty faster than they believe detailed explanations. Human beings are emotional creatures before they are logical ones. The brain constantly searches for signals of confidence, stability, and emotional certainty because uncertainty naturally creates discomfort and fear. This is why calm confidence can influence people more deeply than endless proof or defensive explanations. Over-explaining usually happens when someone fears disbelief, rejection, judgment, or misunderstanding. Even if the words themselves are reasonable, the emotional energy underneath them often reveals insecurity. People subconsciously notice hesitation, nervousness, excessive justification, and emotional urgency. The more someone desperately tries to convince others, the more doubt they unintentionally create. Confident people operate differently. They speak clearly, pause comfortably, and avoid flooding conversations with unnecessary details. Their calmness creates the impression that they fully trust themselves, and this emotional certainty becomes psychologically contagious. Human beings instinctively associate confidence with competence, leadership, and truth, even when they should not. This creates a disturbing reality. Manipulative people understand that emotional certainty influences perception powerfully. Some individuals speak with confidence not because they are correct, but because they know confidence lowers skepticism. History is filled with charismatic people who persuaded massive groups simply because they sounded certain while others sounded unsure. The creepiest part is that people often trust emotional delivery more than factual accuracy. Someone who appears calm and composed during pressure automatically seems more believable than someone who becomes defensive and emotionally frantic. This does not mean truth is unimportant. It means human perception is heavily influenced by emotional signals hidden beneath communication. People quietly study tone, body language, pacing, and emotional control while listening, and in many situations, confidence silently shapes trust long before logic ever gets the chance. Never become too emotionally available to everyone. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that unlimited emotional availability often makes people value you less, not more. Human beings are strangely drawn toward what feels balanced, protected, and emotionally controlled. But when someone gives endless access to their emotions, attention, time, and vulnerability to everyone around them, people slowly begin taking that access for granted. Emotional availability becomes dangerous when it lacks boundaries. The moment people realize they can always reach you, emotionally unload on you, demand your energy, or receive instant reassurance from you, some will unconsciously begin using your emotional stability to regulate their own chaos. Over time, this creates exhaustion, emotional dependency, and imbalance without you even noticing it happening. The unsettling part is that not everyone who seeks emotional closeness truly cares about your well-being. Some people are attracted to emotional access because it gives them comfort, control, validation, or influence. Manipulative individuals especially search for emotionally open people because openness often reveals fears, insecurities, attachment patterns, and psychological weaknesses that can later be used strategically. This is why emotionally disciplined people appear mysterious. They are kind, attentive, and emotionally intelligent, but they do not expose their inner world carelessly. They understand that vulnerability given too quickly can create emotional danger. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your thoughts, wounds, dreams, or fears. There is also a psychological law hidden inside emotional restraint. Scarcity increases perceived value. When your emotional energy is protected carefully, people become more conscious of how they treat your presence. Boundaries quietly create respect because they signal self-worth and emotional stability. The creepiest part is that some people only appreciate emotional access after they realize it is no longer freely available to them. Unlimited access rarely creates respect. Controlled access often does. Weak boundaries invite manipulation. One of the darkest truths about human behavior is that some people constantly search for emotional openings in others. The moment they sense weak boundaries, excessive kindness, fear of rejection, or difficulty saying no, they begin pushing further. Manipulation rarely starts aggressively. It usually begins with small tests, small disrespect, small guilt trips, small emotional pressure, to see how much access they can gain without resistance. Human beings naturally respect limits they cannot easily cross, but when someone repeatedly sacrifices their comfort to avoid disappointing others, manipulative individuals quickly notice it. Weak boundaries silently communicate something dangerous, that emotional pressure works on you. Once people learn this, they often continue using guilt, obligation, fear, or emotional dependency to maintain control. The unsettling part is that many emotionally good people become the easiest targets because they confuse boundaries with cruelty. They fear appearing selfish, cold, or difficult, so they tolerate behavior that slowly drains their peace, confidence, and emotional stability. Over time, they become emotionally exhausted without fully understanding why. Manipulators understand human psychology deeply. They often react negatively the moment boundaries appear because boundaries threaten control. Some become angry, distant, offended, or emotionally dramatic when they realize they can no longer access someone as freely as before. This is why setting boundaries can feel strangely uncomfortable at first. It exposes who truly respected you and who only benefited from your lack of limits. There is also a creepy psychological reality hidden inside boundaries. The people who become most upset when you protect your time, emotions, or energy are often the same people who were quietly benefiting from your emotional openness. Strong boundaries create emotional clarity. They teach others how to treat you without endless explanation. In a world where many people constantly test limits for personal advantage, boundaries quietly become a form of self-protection that keeps manipulation from slowly entering your life unnoticed. Create value before demanding recognition. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people rarely respect potential as much as they respect proven value. Many individuals desperately want admiration, status, attention, or recognition long before they have actually built anything meaningful. They crave applause before effort, visibility before discipline, and importance before contribution. But human beings instinctively trust results more than promises. This is why truly powerful people often spend long periods building quietly while nobody notices them. They understand that real influence grows from usefulness, competence, consistency, and results, not from loudly demanding acknowledgement. The moment someone constantly seeks validation without creating real value first, others subconsciously begin viewing them as emotionally insecure. The disturbing part is that social media and modern culture have intensified this psychological trap. Many people now build appearances before substance. They focus on looking successful, intelligent, or important instead of becoming those things privately first. Over time, this creates fragile identities dependent on external approval rather than genuine capability. Manipulators understand how deeply humans crave recognition. They flatter people who have done very little because emotionally hungry individuals become easier to influence once their ego is fed. This is why people desperate for validation often become vulnerable to manipulation, fake praise, and emotional control. People who create real value move differently. They focus on becoming skilled, reliable, intelligent, disciplined, or emotionally useful before expecting admiration from others. Their confidence develops quietly through evidence rather than constant reassurance. The creepiest part is that genuine value eventually creates attention naturally, while forced recognition usually fades quickly. Human beings may temporarily ignore quiet builders, but over time, consistent value becomes impossible to overlook. Meanwhile, people who only chase visibility often collapse emotionally the moment attention disappears because their identity was built on recognition rather than substance. Learn how envy silently operates around success. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that success does not always attract admiration. Sometimes it attracts silent resentment. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others, and when someone rises beyond what others expected from them, it can quietly trigger insecurity, jealousy, and emotional discomfort in people who once felt equal or superior. The disturbing part about envy is that it rarely announces itself openly. Very few people will directly admit they feel threatened by your growth, confidence, appearance, intelligence, discipline, money, or achievements. Instead, envy often hides behind sarcasm, passive support, subtle criticism, emotional distance, fake concern, or quiet withdrawal. This is why some relationships strangely change the moment you begin improving your life. Certain people were comfortable with you only when you were struggling, doubting yourself, or remaining small enough to protect their own self-image. But once your success becomes visible, your growth unintentionally forces others to confront their own insecurities, failures, or lack of discipline. Envy operates silently because human beings fear appearing bitter or weak. So instead of openly attacking success, envious individuals often downplay achievements, avoid celebrating victories, spread subtle negativity, or secretly hope for failure. Some people even smile in your face while emotionally resenting every step forward you take. The darkest part is that envy can exist even among friends, family members, and people who genuinely care about you. Human emotions are complicated. Someone can love you and still feel uncomfortable watching you become everything they failed to become themselves. Emotionally intelligent people learn to recognize these subtle shifts early. They notice forced smiles, disappearing support, strange energy changes, and hidden competition disguised as friendship. The creepiest reality is that success changes social dynamics quietly. The moment you grow beyond certain people's expectations, you begin discovering who was truly inspired by your success and who secretly felt threatened by it all along. Never expose all your strategies publicly. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that the moment people fully understand your strategy, they immediately begin adapting against it. Human beings are naturally competitive, even when they pretend to support you. The more openly you reveal your plans, methods, weaknesses, and future moves, the more time others have to study, predict, imitate, sabotage, or emotionally prepare against you. This is why highly strategic people rarely reveal everything they are thinking. Silence protects positioning. Mystery protects leverage. The moment every intention becomes public, unpredictability disappears, and unpredictability is one of the most psychologically powerful advantages a person can have. Most people underestimate how closely others observe success. Some people admire quietly, but others compare, envy, and compete silently. Even supportive individuals can unintentionally leak information, shift behavior, or react emotionally once they fully understand your direction. The frightening part is that danger rarely announces itself openly. Sometimes the people smiling at your plans are already adjusting their own behavior behind your back. Manipulators understand this deeply. They often encourage emotional oversharing because exposed people become easier to predict and control. The more someone speaks impulsively about goals, fears, strategies, or personal weaknesses, the easier it becomes to understand how to influence them psychologically. There is also power in controlled ambiguity. When people cannot fully predict your next move, they pay closer attention. Uncertainty creates tension inside the human mind because people naturally crave certainty and control. Calm secrecy quietly creates psychological advantage without needing aggression. The creepiest part is that some battles are lost before they even begin simply because too much information was revealed too early. Sometimes silence is not secrecy born from fear. Sometimes it is protection born from wisdom, observation, and understanding how quickly human behavior changes once people see your full strategy clearly. Stay composed when others expect emotional reactions. One of the creepiest truths about human interaction is that many people secretly study your emotional reactions more than your actual words. The moment someone knows what triggers your anger, insecurity, jealousy, fear, or sadness, they gain psychological access to you. Emotional reactions reveal patterns, and patterns make human behavior easier to predict and control. This is why emotional composure can feel strangely intimidating. Calm people interrupt the emotional expectations others unconsciously prepare for. When someone expects anger but receives silence, expects panic but sees control, or expects desperation but encounters emotional restraint, it creates uncertainty inside the other person. Human beings become uncomfortable when they cannot emotionally predict someone. The unsettling part is that emotional reactions are often intentionally provoked. Manipulators, toxic individuals, and emotionally immature people frequently push emotional buttons to study your weaknesses, gain control of conversations, or pull you into emotional chaos where clear thinking disappears. Once emotions fully take over, logic weakens, impulsive decisions increase, and manipulation becomes easier. Powerful individuals throughout history understood this deeply. They trained themselves to pause before reacting because they knew emotional discipline protects both reputation and influence. The person who loses emotional control first often loses psychological control of the situation as well. There is also a hidden psychological advantage in composure. Calmness forces emotionally reactive people to expose themselves further. While one person stays grounded, the other often becomes louder, more impulsive, more revealing, and emotionally unstable. Silence and composure create space where hidden intentions slowly reveal themselves naturally. The creepiest part is realizing how many people unconsciously expect emotional access to you. Some feel disturbed when they cannot trigger reactions they anticipated. In a world addicted to impulsive emotion, remaining composed quietly becomes a form of emotional power that very few people truly understand. Make your presence feel rare, not constant. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people often value what feels limited, difficult to access, or emotionally uncertain. Constant availability slowly removes emotional tension because the human mind adapts quickly to whatever becomes predictable. The more endlessly accessible someone is, the more their presence begins to feel ordinary instead of meaningful. This is why rare presence creates psychological impact. When someone is not constantly seeking attention, over-explaining themselves, or always available on demand, people unconsciously begin paying closer attention to them. Absence creates curiosity. Mystery creates emotional tension. Human beings naturally think more about what they cannot fully predict or completely possess. The disturbing part is that many people destroy their own value by overexposing themselves emotionally. They constantly text first, constantly explain, constantly chase conversations, and constantly seek reassurance. Over time, this removes emotional balance because their presence no longer feels intentional, it feels guaranteed. And once people feel guaranteed access to someone, appreciation often quietly decreases. Powerful individuals throughout history understood the value of controlled presence. They knew that emotional distance, when balanced correctly, creates respect and intrigue. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionally unavailable. It means understanding that constant exposure weakens emotional impact. Manipulators use this principle carefully. They disappear strategically, reduce attention unexpectedly, or create emotional inconsistency to increase attachment and psychological obsession. The uncertainty forces people to emotionally focus on them more intensely. The creepiest part is that the human brain often mistakes emotional scarcity for deeper value. People begin obsessing over those who are difficult to fully access while overlooking those who are always present. Sometimes the most psychologically powerful person in the room is not the loudest or most visible one, but the one whose presence feels controlled, selective, and impossible to take for granted. Emotional self-control intimidates chaotic people. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that emotionally chaotic people often become deeply uncomfortable around those who remain calm under pressure. Emotional self-control creates a kind of psychological stability that chaotic individuals struggle to predict, manipulate, or emotionally influence, and what people cannot control often unsettles them. Most emotionally reactive individuals depend heavily on external reactions. They expect anger when they provoke, panic when they pressure, guilt when they manipulate, or emotional collapse when they create tension. These reactions give them a sense of power because emotional chaos becomes familiar territory to them. But when someone stays composed instead of reacting impulsively, the entire emotional dynamic suddenly changes. Calm people interrupt emotional control patterns. Their silence feels heavy. Their patience feels unreadable. Their refusal to emotionally explode creates uncertainty inside people who are used to controlling conversations through emotional intensity. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals often appear intimidating without even trying to be. The disturbing part is that chaotic people sometimes mistake emotional self-control for coldness, arrogance, or emotional detachment because they cannot understand stability they do not possess themselves. Deep down, controlled people remind them of the emotional disorder they secretly struggle with internally. Manipulators especially dislike emotionally grounded individuals because emotional manipulation requires reactions to survive. Guilt tactics, emotional pressure, gaslighting, and provocation become far less effective when someone pauses before reacting and observes the situation calmly instead of emotionally. The creepiest part is that calmness silently exposes chaos. The more composed one person becomes, the more emotionally unstable behavior around them starts revealing itself naturally. People begin exposing their impatience, anger, insecurity, impulsiveness, and emotional desperation without realizing it. In a world where many people are controlled by emotion, emotional self-control quietly becomes a form of invisible power that unsettles those who cannot master themselves. Keep improving, while others stay distracted. One of the creepiest truths about modern life is how easily human beings can be distracted away from their own potential. Most people are not destroyed by lack of talent. They are slowly weakened by endless distraction, emotional noise, comparison, entertainment, gossip, temporary pleasure, and constant mental stimulation. Day after day, they lose focus so gradually that they barely notice time quietly disappearing from their lives. This is why disciplined self-improvement becomes so psychologically powerful. While distracted people chase temporary emotional satisfaction, focused individuals quietly build skills, knowledge, emotional control, health, confidence, and long-term advantages behind the scenes. The frightening part is that the gap between distracted people and disciplined people often looks small at first, but over time it becomes enormous. Human beings naturally underestimate slow progress because the brain craves immediate results. Many people quit improving themselves simply because change feels invisible in the beginning, but consistent improvement compounds silently. A person who reads daily, trains consistently, controls emotions, studies people carefully, and protects focus for years eventually becomes almost unrecognizable compared to those who remained mentally scattered. Manipulators and toxic environments often benefit from distraction as well. Distracted people rarely question their lives deeply. They stay emotionally reactive, impulsive, and easier to influence because constant stimulation weakens reflection and self-awareness. Focused people, however, become harder to manipulate because they think independently and observe more carefully. There is also something unsettling about quietly improving without announcing it publicly. While others seek attention, validation, and immediate recognition, disciplined people often grow in silence. By the time others notice the transformation, the advantage has already been built. The creepiest part is that years later, many people suddenly realize they were not standing still at all. They were quietly falling behind while someone else stayed focused every single day. Never underestimate quiet competitors. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that the most dangerous competitors are often not the loudest, most aggressive, or most visible people in the room. Loud people usually reveal themselves early. Quiet people, however, often observe silently, while everyone else becomes distracted by appearances. Because they speak less, others underestimate them. And underestimation creates the perfect environment for hidden preparation. Human beings naturally pay attention to obvious threats. We notice arrogance, dominance, and open competition quickly, but calm and reserved individuals often escape suspicion because silence is mistaken for weakness, passiveness, or lack of ambition. In reality, some quiet people are simply studying everything carefully before making their move. The unsettling part is that quiet competitors frequently gather more information than everyone else. While others talk emotionally, seek attention, or reveal plans openly, observant individuals learn personalities, weaknesses, patterns, and opportunities without exposing themselves. Silence allows them to remain emotionally unreadable, while others unknowingly reveal their entire strategy. There is also a strange psychological power in quietness. People tend to project assumptions onto silent individuals because the human mind becomes uncomfortable with emotional uncertainty. Some assume quiet people are harmless, insecure, or uninformed. That false sense of safety often becomes a costly mistake. Manipulators and highly strategic individuals understand this deeply. They know visibility attracts resistance, while quietness allows movement without emotional interference. Some of the most successful people quietly build influence, skills, relationships, and opportunities while others remain busy performing confidence publicly. The creepiest part is realizing that many people only notice quiet competitors after it is already too late. By the time the silent person finally reveals their capability, position, or success, they have often been preparing far longer than anyone imagined. Sometimes the person speaking the least has been understanding the entire room more carefully than everyone else combined. Protect your focus from unnecessary social noise. One of the creepiest truths about modern life is that most people no longer lose their potential through failure. They lose it through constant distraction. Human attention has become one of the most manipulated resources in the world. Every notification, argument, trend, opinion, drama, and endless stream of information quietly fights for psychological control over the mind. The disturbing part is that social noise rarely feels dangerous in the moment. It often feels harmless, entertaining, or emotionally stimulating, but over time, constant exposure to other people's emotions, opinions, and chaos slowly fragments concentration. The brain becomes addicted to stimulation and loses its ability to sit with silence, deep thinking, or long-term focus. This is why highly focused individuals often appear distant or selective socially. They understand that not every conversation deserves mental energy. Not every debate deserves attention. Not every opinion deserves emotional reaction. Protecting focus sometimes requires separating yourself from environments filled with constant emotional noise and unnecessary distraction. Manipulators understand how vulnerable distracted minds become. Emotionally overloaded people make impulsive decisions, struggle with discipline, and lose clarity about their goals. The more mentally scattered someone becomes, the easier they are to influence emotionally, because their attention constantly shifts before deep thinking can occur. There is also a darker psychological effect hidden inside social noise. Constant comparison slowly damages identity. The more people consume endless opinions, lifestyles, achievements, and emotional performances from others, the more disconnected they often become from their own direction and inner voice. The creepiest part is that many people spend years surrounded by noise without realizing how deeply it controls them. Their thoughts stop feeling like their own. Their emotions become reactions to external stimulation rather than internal clarity. Sometimes real power is not found in learning more information. It is found in learning what deserves to be ignored so your mind remains sharp, calm, and impossible to mentally overwhelm. Learn to recognize fake loyalty early. One of the creepiest truths about human relationships is that not everyone standing beside you is truly with you. Some people remain close only while it benefits them emotionally, socially, financially, or psychologically. Fake loyalty often looks convincing in the beginning because human beings naturally perform kindness when there is something to gain. This is why false loyalty can be difficult to detect early. People smile, support, compliment, and stay emotionally available while circumstances are comfortable. But loyalty is not truly revealed during easy moments. It reveals itself during pressure, inconvenience, conflict, temptation, jealousy, or personal sacrifice. Emotionally intelligent people learn to study behavior carefully during difficult situations. They notice who disappears when problems arise, who secretly competes instead of supports, who shares private information carelessly, and who changes energy the moment stronger opportunities appear elsewhere. Human beings often reveal their real priorities when loyalty becomes costly. The disturbing part is that fake loyalty usually operates quietly. Rarely does someone openly announce betrayal beforehand. Instead, there are subtle warning signs people ignore because emotions create denial, forced support, inconsistent behavior, hidden envy, selective honesty, emotional convenience, and sudden personality shifts around different people often expose loyalty that was never genuine to begin with. Manipulative individuals are especially skilled at performing loyalty temporarily. They create emotional closeness quickly, mirror values, and make promises they never truly intend to keep. Their goal is access, trust, influence, or personal advantage, not genuine connection. The creepiest part is that many people do not discover fake loyalty until moments of vulnerability expose it completely. Sometimes success reveals hidden jealousy. Sometimes failure reveals abandonment. Sometimes secrets reveal betrayal. Real loyalty remains consistent even when emotions fluctuate, opportunities change, or situations become difficult. And once you begin recognizing patterns of false loyalty early, you start protecting your trust far more carefully from people who were never truly committed to you at all. The person who needs less often controls more. One of the creepiest truths about human relationships is that emotional dependence quietly shifts power away from the person who feels it most. The more someone desperately needs attention, validation, reassurance, affection, approval, money, or emotional connection from others, the easier they become to influence and control. Human beings naturally sense dependency even when it is hidden beneath confidence or pride. This is why people who need less often appear more powerful. They are calmer under pressure because their emotional stability does not fully depend on external reactions. They can walk away more easily, think more clearly, and make decisions with less fear. The unsettling part is that emotional independence creates psychological leverage without needing aggression or dominance. Manipulators understand this deeply. They often study what people crave emotionally because needs create openings for control. Someone desperate for validation can be manipulated with praise. Someone terrified of abandonment can be controlled through distance and inconsistency. Someone addicted to approval becomes emotionally predictable. The stronger the emotional need, the easier it becomes to influence behavior. People who require less external reassurance tend to remain emotionally composed, while others become reactive. They are harder to pressure because fear does not control them as strongly. This creates an almost intimidating calmness. Others cannot easily predict how they will respond because emotional desperation is absent from their decisions. There is also a darker psychological reality hidden here. Many relationships are not built purely on love, respect, or loyalty. Some are built on emotional dependency. The moment one person emotionally outgrows that dependency, the entire power dynamic quietly changes. The creepiest part is that true freedom often begins the moment a person realizes they no longer need constant approval, attention, or emotional validation to feel stable within themselves. Once fear of losing decreases, emotional control over you decreases too. Never let praise make you careless. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that praise can become just as dangerous as criticism. Most people believe attacks weaken them, but uncontrolled admiration often blinds people far more effectively. The moment someone becomes emotionally addicted to validation, compliments begin quietly controlling their decisions, behavior, and self-awareness. Human beings naturally crave approval because praise activates emotional reward systems inside the brain. It creates comfort, confidence, and a sense of importance. But this emotional pleasure can slowly lower caution. People become less observant, less disciplined, and more vulnerable the moment they believe admiration automatically means loyalty or genuine respect. The unsettling part is that praise is frequently used strategically. Manipulators understand that flattery lowers defenses faster than force. Some people compliment excessively to gain trust, emotional access, or influence over someone's ego. Once a person feels admired, they often stop questioning motives carefully. They begin revealing more, relaxing boundaries, and underestimating hidden intentions. History is filled with powerful individuals destroyed not by enemies, but by praise that made them arrogant, distracted, or emotionally overconfident. The more people constantly tell someone they are special, untouchable, or superior, the easier it becomes for that person to stop improving while silently drifting toward weakness. There is also a creepy social reality hidden inside admiration. Not everyone praising you wants you to grow forever. Some people enjoy watching confidence slowly become ego, because ego eventually creates mistakes, emotional blindness, and downfall. Excessive praise can quietly disconnect people from reality while making them easier to manipulate. Emotionally disciplined individuals remain careful even when admired. They understand compliments may reveal more about the speaker's intentions than about their true value. Real confidence does not become intoxicated by praise, because it knows validation from others can disappear as quickly as it appeared. Sometimes the moment people start applauding you the loudest is the exact moment you need self-awareness the most. Strategic mystery creates fascination. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people become deeply obsessed with what they cannot fully understand. The human mind is naturally drawn toward uncertainty because uncertainty creates emotional tension. When someone reveals everything about themselves immediately, curiosity dies quickly. But when parts of a person remain hidden, the imagination begins filling the gaps on its own. This is why mystery has always carried psychological power. People often project greater depth, intelligence, confidence, or value onto those who remain emotionally controlled and difficult to fully read. Silence, restraint, and selective self-disclosure create an invisible tension that keeps others mentally engaged far longer than constant exposure ever could. The disturbing part is that many people unknowingly destroy attraction, influence, and respect by revealing too much too quickly. They expose every emotion, every plan, every insecurity, and every thought almost immediately because they fear misunderstanding or rejection. But overexposure removes psychological tension, and without tension, fascination fades. Strategic mystery does not mean becoming fake, manipulative, or emotionally cold. It means understanding that not every part of your inner world needs immediate access. Emotionally intelligent people reveal themselves gradually. They observe first, speak carefully, and allow curiosity to grow naturally rather than forcing connection through endless self-exposure. Manipulators understand this principle deeply. They often reveal only enough information to maintain emotional intrigue while keeping their real intentions hidden underneath. This uncertainty keeps people psychologically attached because the brain becomes obsessed with solving emotional puzzles it cannot fully decode. The creepiest part is that humans often value people more when they feel slightly emotionally out of reach. Mystery creates imagination, and imagination can become stronger than reality itself. Sometimes the person who reveals the least emotionally becomes the one others think about the most because uncertainty quietly keeps their presence alive inside the mind. Observe how people act when they no longer need you. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that many relationships are built more on convenience than genuine connection. As long as someone benefits emotionally, financially, socially, or psychologically from your presence, they may appear loyal, caring, attentive, and supportive. But the real test of character begins the moment their dependence on you disappears. Human beings often reveal their true feelings through changed behavior after they no longer need access to your value. Some people slowly become distant. Others stop showing respect, effort, or emotional consistency. The kindness that once felt genuine suddenly fades because the hidden motivation behind it was never true connection. It was personal benefit. This is why emotionally intelligent people pay close attention to behavioral shifts after circumstances change. They observe who still checks on them when there is nothing to gain. They notice who remains respectful after status changes, emotional support ends, opportunities disappear, or usefulness decreases. Patterns become far more honest once incentives are removed. The disturbing part is that many people never notice this happening because they confuse temporary attachment with genuine loyalty. Emotional comfort can create blindness. The brain wants to believe affection was real, even when behavior quietly proves otherwise over time. Manipulative people especially struggle to maintain fake attachment once they stop benefiting from someone. Their effort weakens, their energy changes, conversations become colder, shorter, or transactional. Some even disappear entirely without explanation because their emotional investment was always conditional from the beginning. The creepiest reality is that people often expose their true intentions through absence rather than presence. Anyone can act caring while receiving something valuable in return, but once the benefit fades away, behavior becomes brutally honest. Sometimes the most painful form of clarity is realizing that someone loved your usefulness, your attention, your support, or your resources more than they ever truly valued you as a person. Learn when to walk away without warning. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that not every situation improves through explanation, patience, or emotional loyalty. Some environments, relationships, and people slowly drain your peace while convincing you to stay longer through guilt, hope, manipulation, or emotional confusion. Over time, many people become trapped not because they physically cannot leave, but because they emotionally fear what leaving might mean. This is why knowing when to walk away quietly becomes a form of psychological survival. There are moments when endless conversations no longer solve anything. The patterns have already revealed the truth. The disrespect keeps repeating. The manipulation continues. The emotional exhaustion deepens. And yet many people stay because they are waiting for closure, understanding, or one final sign that things will change. Manipulators often depend on this hesitation. They know emotionally attached people usually announce their departure repeatedly before actually leaving. This gives controlling individuals time to guilt trip, confuse, love bomb, or emotionally pull them back into the same unhealthy cycle again. Walking away without warning removes that emotional opening. It interrupts the cycle before manipulation can fully restart. Calm detachment protects your mental clarity because constant emotional battles often weaken judgment over time. Silence becomes powerful when words no longer change behavior. There is also something psychologically unsettling about someone who leaves calmly instead of dramatically. No begging, no emotional collapse, no final performance, just distance. It creates unanswered questions because people naturally expect emotional chaos during separation. Quiet withdrawal feels colder, more controlled, and harder to emotionally manipulate. The creepiest part is that many people never realize how much damage a situation was causing until they finally experience peace after leaving it. Sometimes the strongest decision is not fighting harder to stay. Sometimes it is recognizing that your silence and disappearance say everything words no longer can. Power grows when emotions stay. Disciplined. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that emotional people are often controlled long before they realize it. The moment emotions become impulsive and undisciplined, judgment weakens, reactions become predictable, and influence quietly shifts into the hands of calmer individuals. Most people think power comes from dominance, aggression, or loud confidence. But real psychological power usually belongs to the person who stays emotionally controlled under pressure. Human beings naturally react emotionally to fear, rejection, disrespect, insecurity, jealousy, and uncertainty. These reactions are normal, but they also expose vulnerabilities. The more emotionally reactive someone becomes, the easier it is for others to predict their behavior, provoke responses, and manipulate decisions. Emotional chaos creates openings that disciplined people quietly exploit. The unsettling part is that manipulators understand this deeply. Some intentionally create emotional confusion, anger, urgency, or guilt because emotionally overwhelmed minds stop thinking clearly. Once emotions take control, people often reveal secrets, make reckless decisions, destroy relationships, or damage their own reputation without realizing they are being psychologically guided. Emotionally disciplined individuals operate differently. They pause before reacting. They observe tension without immediately surrendering to it. This creates a strange psychological effect because calmness unsettles emotionally impulsive people. In moments where most individuals lose control, disciplined composure begins to feel intimidating. There is also a hidden form of power inside emotional restraint. People trust controlled individuals more because stability signals inner strength. Someone who remains calm during conflict appears more dangerous, intelligent, and psychologically grounded than someone shouting emotionally for control. The creepiest part is realizing how many battles are won emotionally long before they are won physically or verbally. Often the person who controls the emotional atmosphere controls the direction of the entire situation. In a world driven by impulsive reactions, Emotional discipline quietly becomes one of the rarest and most powerful forms of influence. Avoid revealing insecurity through excessive talking. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that people often speak the most when they feel the least emotionally secure. Excessive talking is not always confidence. Many times, it is nervousness disguised as communication. When people fear silence, rejection, judgment, or misunderstanding, they begin filling empty space with unnecessary words in an unconscious attempt to regain emotional control. The disturbing part is that insecurity quietly leaks through speech patterns. Over-explaining, constant self-justification, nervous storytelling, nonstop bragging, or talking too quickly often reveals emotional tension underneath the surface. Human beings instinctively notice these signals even when they cannot explain why someone suddenly feels uncertain, anxious, or emotionally exposed. This is why emotionally disciplined people understand the power of restraint. They know that calmness creates authority, while excessive talking often weakens it. Someone who speaks carefully appears more composed, more confident, and more difficult to manipulate because they are not emotionally rushing to prove themselves constantly. Manipulators understand this deeply. They often stay quiet intentionally, while others talk excessively because emotional people reveal enormous amounts of psychological information through uncontrolled speech. The more someone talks impulsively, the more they expose insecurities, fears, emotional triggers, and hidden desires without realizing it. There is also a darker social reality hidden inside excessive talking. People who constantly seek validation through words often become emotionally dependent on external reassurance. They need reactions, agreement, laughter, attention, or approval to feel emotionally safe. Over time, this makes them easier to emotionally control because silence itself begins to make them uncomfortable. The creepiest part is that powerful people often do the opposite. They pause before speaking. They allow silence to exist naturally. They reveal only what is necessary. In a world where most people rush to prove themselves verbally, controlled silence quietly becomes a signal of emotional strength and inner certainty. People often test boundaries before respecting them. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that many people unconsciously test how much they can get away with before deciding how to treat you. Human beings naturally study limits, tolerance, emotional reactions, and consequences in social interactions. This is why weak boundaries often invite stronger disrespect over time instead of creating peace. Boundary testing usually begins subtly. Someone interrupts your time repeatedly, makes small disrespectful comments disguised as jokes, ignores your comfort, pushes emotional limits, pressures you into things you dislike, or slowly demands more access to your energy than you originally allowed. These small moments are rarely random. They are psychological observations. People watch carefully to see what you tolerate. The moment someone realizes there are no consequences for crossing boundaries, their behavior often escalates little by little. Human psychology naturally expands into spaces where resistance is weak or absent. The disturbing part is that kind people are often targeted the most because manipulators mistake kindness for emotional weakness. Some individuals intentionally push limits to identify who fears conflict, who struggles to say no, and who sacrifices personal comfort to maintain approval. Once they detect emotional passivity, they begin operating with greater confidence and control. Emotionally disciplined people understand that boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are psychological instructions that teach others how access to you will work. Calm firmness creates respect because it removes uncertainty. People may dislike boundaries initially, but they often respect them more over time than emotional inconsistency. The creepiest part is that people who strongly defend their boundaries usually appear intimidating to those who benefit from weak ones. Manipulators become uncomfortable around individuals they cannot emotionally pressure or quietly control. In a world where many people constantly test limits, the ability to protect your emotional space calmly and consistently becomes a hidden form of self-respect that quietly changes how others treat you. Never confuse attention with genuine respect. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that attention and respect are not the same thing, even though many people desperately confuse them. Attention is easy to attract because human beings are naturally curious, emotional, and drawn toward stimulation. People pay attention to drama, beauty, controversy, confidence, status, emotional chaos, and even weakness. But attention alone does not mean admiration, loyalty, trust, or genuine value. This is why some people become addicted to visibility without realizing they are emotionally starving for something much deeper. The brain interprets attention as importance because being noticed temporarily satisfies emotional needs. Yet many individuals surrounded by attention still feel deeply empty because attention can disappear the moment entertainment, usefulness, or emotional excitement fades. Respect operates differently. Respect is built slowly through consistency, boundaries, emotional control, competence, integrity, and self-respect. Attention can be emotional and temporary. Respect is psychological and lasting. The frightening part is that people will often give attention to someone they secretly look down on. Manipulators understand this deeply. They use attention strategically to control emotions. Praise, validation, compliments, mixed signals, and sudden interest can create emotional attachment very quickly, especially in people who crave external approval. Once someone becomes addicted to attention, they become easier to influence because their emotional stability begins depending on outside reactions. There is also something dangerous about chasing visibility at all costs. People who desperately seek attention often slowly sacrifice privacy, dignity, authenticity, and emotional peace just to remain noticed. Over time, they begin shaping their identity around reactions instead of reality. The creepiest part is that genuine respect is often quiet. It does not always come with applause, obsession, or loud validation. Sometimes the people who truly respect you speak less about you, but trust you deeply, value your presence, and remain loyal even when attention disappears completely. Make people earn deeper access to you. One of the creepiest truths about human nature is that people often value what feels difficult to access more than what is freely available. The moment someone gives unlimited emotional access too quickly, others frequently begin taking their presence, kindness, attention, and vulnerability for granted. Human beings are strangely drawn toward what must be earned because effort creates psychological value. This is why emotionally intelligent people become careful about how quickly they reveal their inner world. They understand that trust should develop gradually, not emotionally rushed through loneliness, excitement, or desperation for connection. Every layer of your fears, dreams, insecurities, habits, and emotional history gives someone deeper psychological access to you. Once that access exists, it can be used for closeness or manipulation. The unsettling part is that many manipulative individuals move fast intentionally. They create artificial emotional intimacy early by oversharing, asking deeply personal questions, mirroring emotions, or making someone feel uniquely understood. This rapid connection lowers boundaries before genuine trust has actually been earned. By the time the emotional attachment forms, the manipulator already understands the person's vulnerabilities. There is also a strange psychological power in emotional restraint. People become more curious when they realize not everyone receives the same level of access to you. Selective openness creates mystery, emotional tension, and respect because it signals self-worth and discipline. Someone who protects their inner world carefully appears more emotionally grounded than someone who emotionally exposes themselves to everyone seeking attention or validation. Powerful observers understand that real trust is revealed through consistency over time. Loyalty, emotional safety, and character cannot be measured through words alone. They are tested slowly through actions, pressure, honesty, and behavior during difficult moments. The creepiest part is realizing how many people only seem interested in you because unrestricted access was made too easy. Sometimes privacy is not distance. It is protection for parts of yourself not everyone deserves to touch. Learn how to remain emotionally detached under pressure. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that pressure reveals who truly controls themselves and who is controlled by emotion. Most people appear calm when life feels comfortable, but the moment stress, fear, rejection, conflict, or uncertainty enters the situation, hidden emotional weaknesses quickly surface. Under pressure, people expose desperation, impulsiveness, insecurity, anger, and panic without realizing how visible it becomes. This is why emotional detachment under pressure feels strangely intimidating to others. Calm individuals disrupt emotional chaos because they refuse to emotionally collapse inside tense situations. While everyone else reacts impulsively, emotionally detached people slow down, observe carefully, and maintain control over their decisions instead of surrendering to panic. The disturbing part is that manipulative people intentionally create pressure to gain psychological advantage. They know emotional stress weakens logic. Fear and urgency make people easier to influence because pressured minds seek immediate relief rather than long-term clarity. This is why emotional manipulation often involves guilt, panic, confusion, emotional confrontation, or artificial urgency. People who cannot regulate emotions under pressure become extremely predictable. The moment someone knows what scares you, angers you, or emotionally destabilizes you, they gain invisible influence over your reactions. Emotional control protects psychological freedom. Detachment does not mean becoming cold, heartless, or emotionally dead. It means refusing to let temporary emotions take control of permanent decisions. Emotionally detached individuals still feel deeply, but they do not immediately surrender to what they feel. They create mental space between emotion and action. The creepiest part is that emotionally detached people often appear mysterious because they remain composed during situations that emotionally overwhelm everyone else. Others expect panic, anger, pleading, or emotional collapse, but instead they encounter calm observation. And in high-pressure situations, calmness itself quietly becomes power because emotional people rarely know how to control someone who refuses to emotionally unravel. Hidden discipline creates visible authority. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that people are deeply influenced by signs of control, consistency, and restraint, even when they cannot fully explain why. Hidden discipline quietly changes the way someone speaks, moves, reacts, and carries themselves. Over time, this creates a natural sense of authority that others instinctively notice long before they understand its source. Most people only see the visible result. They see confidence, emotional stability, sharp focus, calm decision-making, strong boundaries, physical presence, or quiet success. What they do not see are the invisible habits behind it all, the self-control practiced in private, the emotional restraint during painful moments, the discipline maintained when nobody was watching, and the repeated refusal to follow impulses that weaken character over time. This is why true authority rarely needs to announce itself loudly. Disciplined people often appear grounded because their behavior is built on internal control instead of emotional chaos. They do not constantly seek validation, panic under pressure, or react impulsively to every emotional trigger. Their calmness creates psychological weight. The disturbing part is that human beings naturally respect people who seem capable of controlling themselves. Deep down, most individuals struggle with distractions, emotional inconsistency, laziness, fear, or impulsiveness. So when they encounter someone who appears deeply disciplined, it creates both admiration and discomfort at the same time. Manipulators often fake confidence externally, but real discipline eventually exposes the difference. Forced authority relies on intimidation, noise, or performance. Genuine authority quietly grows from consistent self-mastery. The creepiest reality is that discipline changes social dynamics silently. The more control someone develops over their habits, emotions, time, and mind, the less emotionally accessible they become to manipulation. And in a world where most people are controlled by impulses, hidden discipline begins creating an almost unsettling level of presence and influence. Stay. Difficult to emotionally control. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that many people unconsciously search for emotional control over others. Some do it subtly through guilt, attention, praise, fear, silence, jealousy, or emotional withdrawal. Others do it openly through pressure, intimidation, or manipulation. The moment someone learns what emotionally destabilizes you, they gain a hidden form of influence over your decisions and behavior. Human beings are easiest to control when emotions become stronger than awareness. Loneliness can make people tolerate disrespect. Fear can make them obey. Validation can make them dependent. Anger can make them impulsive. Manipulators understand this deeply. They study emotional reactions carefully because reactions expose psychological openings. The unsettling part is that emotional control often feels invisible while it is happening. Many people believe they are making free choices, while their behavior is actually being shaped by emotional pressure created by someone else. A manipulative person may withhold affection to create anxiety, create confusion to weaken confidence, or alternate between warmth and distance to increase emotional dependency. Emotionally disciplined individuals become difficult to control because they pause before reacting emotionally. They do not instantly surrender their peace to criticism, rejection, praise, or provocation. This creates uncertainty for manipulative people because emotional predictability disappears. Someone who cannot be easily triggered becomes psychologically exhausting to manipulate. There is also a hidden power in emotional independence. The less someone depends on external validation, constant reassurance, or emotional approval, the harder it becomes for others to influence them through emotional tactics. Calmness removes leverage from people who rely on emotional chaos to gain control. The creepiest part is realizing how many social interactions quietly revolve around emotional influence beneath polite conversation. Some people are not trying to understand your emotions at all. They are trying to learn how to shape them. In a world filled with invisible emotional pressure, emotional self-control quietly becomes a form of protection. Never reveal desperation. During negotiation, one of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that desperation instantly changes the balance of power. The moment people sense that you emotionally need something too badly, attention, approval, money, love, opportunity, or validation, they unconsciously begin viewing you differently. Desperation weakens perceived value because human beings instinctively respect what appears emotionally controlled and difficult to pressure. This is why negotiations become psychologically dangerous when emotions take over. The more desperate someone feels internally, the more likely they are to over-explain, chase agreement, lower standards, accept unfair treatment, or make impulsive decisions just to avoid loss or discomfort. Emotional urgency clouds judgment and quietly hands leverage to the other side. The disturbing part is that experienced manipulators actively search for signs of desperation. They study body language, tone changes, nervous talking, rushed decisions, emotional reactions, and fear of walking away. Once desperation becomes visible, many people immediately become more demanding because they realize the emotionally desperate person fears losing the deal more than protecting their own position. Powerful negotiators understand the value of emotional control. They remain calm, patient, and willing to walk away if necessary. This creates uncertainty because emotionally detached individuals are difficult to pressure. The person who appears least emotionally dependent often controls the direction of the negotiation without needing force. There is also a darker psychological reality hidden inside desperation. Desperate people often unintentionally reveal their weaknesses before negotiations even begin. They expose how badly they need acceptance, success, money, or emotional reassurance, giving others invisible psychological access to manipulate them more easily. The creepiest part is that many negotiations in life are not just about material outcomes. They are emotional tests. People quietly study who remains composed under pressure and who emotionally collapses when something important feels at risk. Sometimes the strongest position in any negotiation comes from knowing you can survive without the outcome, while the other person secretly fears losing emotional control first. Calm energy often dominates loud personalities. One of the creepiest truths about social dynamics is that loudness is often mistaken for power when, in reality, it frequently hides emotional insecurity, attention hunger, or the need for control. Truly calm people rarely compete for dominance openly because they understand something most others do not. Emotional stability naturally shifts the energy of a room without force. Human beings instinctively react to emotional energy. Loud personalities often try to control conversations through volume, intensity, interruption, emotional pressure, or constant attention-seeking behavior. Many people unconsciously submit to this because emotional intensity creates psychological discomfort. The louder person appears dominant simply because others become emotionally overwhelmed. But calm individuals disrupt this entire pattern. Their steady presence refuses to emotionally submit to chaos. They speak slowly while others rush. They remain composed while others become reactive. Their emotional control creates an unsettling contrast that quietly exposes instability in louder personalities. The disturbing part is that calmness creates psychological gravity. Human beings naturally become curious about people who appear emotionally unaffected by pressure. Silence, patience, and composure force others to pay closer attention because calm people cannot easily be emotionally predicted or controlled. Manipulators especially dislike emotionally grounded individuals because emotional chaos loses effectiveness around someone who refuses to react impulsively. Guilt, intimidation, aggression, and provocation depend heavily on emotional responses to survive. Calm energy weakens those tactics immediately. The creepiest reality is that loud people often reveal more about themselves than calm people ever do. The need to constantly dominate conversations, seek validation, interrupt others, or prove superiority usually exposes hidden emotional instability underneath the surface. In many situations, the quietest person quietly controls the emotional atmosphere simply because they are the least emotionally controlled by everyone else around them. Learn to recognize when silence is the strongest answer. One of the creepiest truths about human interaction is that not every situation deserves a response, yet most people feel emotionally forced to react immediately. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with being misunderstood, ignored, criticized, or challenged, so they instinctively defend themselves through words. But many conflicts are not actually searching for truth or understanding. They are searching for emotional reactions. This is why silence can become psychologically powerful. When someone expects anger, explanation, or emotional chaos and receives calm silence instead, it creates uncertainty inside them. The human mind naturally seeks emotional feedback, and when that feedback disappears, people often begin exposing more about themselves than they originally intended. The unsettling part is that manipulative individuals frequently provoke conversations only to study reactions. They may criticize, accuse, mock, guilt trip, or emotionally bait someone simply to pull them into emotional exposure. The moment a person becomes reactive, they often reveal insecurities, frustrations, fears, or weaknesses that can later be used against them. Silence interrupts that process. It protects emotional energy while denying manipulative people the reaction they were hoping to extract. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals do not respond to every insult, misunderstanding, or emotional attack. They understand that some people become more powerful the moment you emotionally engage with them. There is also a strange psychological tension hidden inside silence. Quietness forces people to sit alone with their own thoughts, assumptions, and emotional discomfort. Many individuals begin over-explaining, apologizing, or revealing hidden intentions simply because silence makes them nervous. The creepiest part is realizing how much emotional control people lose simply because they cannot tolerate silence. In a world addicted to instant reactions, endless explanations, and emotional noise, the ability to stay silent at the right moment quietly becomes a form of psychological strength that most people never fully master. Weakness, repeated, becomes identity. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that the brain slowly turns repeated behavior into personal identity. The more often people surrender to fear, insecurity, laziness, emotional impulsiveness, or self-doubt, the more those patterns stop feeling temporary and start feeling like who they are. Human beings are creatures of repetition, and the mind constantly builds identity from whatever behaviors happen most consistently. This is why small weaknesses become dangerous when repeated without awareness. A single moment of fear means nothing, but repeated avoidance slowly teaches the brain that fear controls your decisions. One emotional outburst changes little, but constant emotional reactions slowly shape a personality ruled by impulse instead of discipline. The disturbing part is that this transformation often happens invisibly over time. People rarely wake up one morning suddenly weak, insecure, or emotionally dependent. Instead, repeated behaviors quietly condition the nervous system until destructive patterns begin feeling normal and permanent. Manipulators understand this deeply. They often encourage emotional weakness because emotionally unstable people become easier to control. Someone addicted to validation, comfort, approval, or emotional reassurance slowly loses psychological independence without realizing it. Over time, the weakness becomes part of their identity, making manipulation easier and resistance harder. There is also a brutal emotional reality hidden inside repetition. The human mind always tries to protect consistency. Once people identify themselves as anxious, unworthy, weak, or emotionally broken, they unconsciously begin behaving in ways that confirm that identity repeatedly, even when opportunities for growth appear. This is why disciplined people protect small habits so aggressively. They understand that repeated strength also becomes identity. Repeated calmness creates emotional stability. Repeated discipline creates self-respect. Repeated courage slowly changes the nervous system itself. The creepiest part is that identity is often not created by one massive decision. It is quietly shaped by the behaviors people tolerate and repeat every single day until the pattern eventually becomes who they believe they are. Never allow temporary loneliness to lower your standards. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that loneliness can quietly change the way people tolerate disrespect, manipulation, and emotional emptiness. When someone feels isolated for too long, the fear of being alone can become stronger than the desire to be treated well. This is where dangerous decisions often begin. Human beings are emotionally wired for connection, which makes loneliness deeply uncomfortable for most people. The mind starts craving attention, comfort, validation, and emotional closeness so intensely that it may begin ignoring obvious warning signs simply to escape the feeling of emptiness. People who would normally reject toxic behavior suddenly begin accepting things they once promised themselves they would never tolerate. This is why emotionally manipulative individuals often target lonely people carefully. They sense emotional hunger, the need to feel chosen, and the fear of abandonment. Once they recognize weakened standards, they slowly introduce disrespect, inconsistency, emotional games, or control because they know loneliness makes people more likely to stay. The disturbing part is that temporary loneliness creates emotional desperation that can feel almost addictive. A little attention suddenly feels meaningful. Small affection feels powerful. Even unhealthy relationships can begin feeling safer than solitude because the brain becomes focused on emotional relief instead of long-term emotional health. Emotionally disciplined people understand that loneliness itself is not the true danger. The danger is making permanent emotional compromises because of temporary emotional pain. Standards exist to protect peace, dignity, emotional safety, and self-respect. The creepiest reality is that some people only enter your life because they sense you are emotionally vulnerable enough to accept less than you deserve. And once someone realizes you fear loneliness more than mistreatment, emotional control becomes much easier for them. Temporary loneliness passes, but lowering your standards for the wrong people can create emotional damage that lasts far longer than the loneliness ever would have. Understand the difference between kindness and submission. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that many people confuse kindness with weakness until they encounter someone who knows how to be compassionate without surrendering their self-respect. Genuine kindness comes from emotional strength and choice. Submission, however, often comes from fear of rejection, conflict, abandonment, disapproval, or losing connection with others. This is why some people become trapped in unhealthy relationships and manipulative environments while believing they are simply being nice. They constantly tolerate disrespect, overextend themselves emotionally, ignore personal needs, and allow boundaries to be crossed because they are terrified of appearing selfish or difficult. Over time, kindness slowly transforms into silent self-erasure. Human beings naturally test emotional limits, especially when they sense someone struggles to say no. Manipulators are highly skilled at identifying individuals who mistake self-sacrifice for love. They use guilt, emotional pressure, disappointment, or victimhood to gain more access, more control, and more emotional compliance, little by little. The disturbing part is that submissive behavior often attracts even greater disrespect instead of appreciation. Many people unconsciously lose respect for individuals who abandon their own boundaries to please everyone else. Emotional weakness invites control because people instinctively expand into spaces where resistance disappears. Kindness with boundaries feels completely different. Emotionally strong individuals help others without allowing themselves to be emotionally consumed. They can say no calmly. They can walk away from manipulation without guilt. They remain compassionate while still protecting their dignity and emotional balance. The creepiest reality is that some people only appear kind because they are afraid of confrontation. But true kindness is not obedience. It is controlled compassion rooted in self-respect. In a world where emotional manipulation often disguises itself as love, loyalty, or obligation, understanding the difference between kindness and submission becomes a form of psychological protection that quietly changes every relationship around you. People respect consistency more than intensity. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that intense people often create strong impressions quickly, but lose respect just as fast when their energy becomes unstable. Human beings are naturally drawn toward reliability because consistency creates emotional safety. Someone who is disciplined, steady, and predictable in their principles quietly builds trust over time, while emotionally intense individuals often exhaust people through unpredictability. Intensity feels powerful in the moment. Loud motivation, sudden passion, emotional promises, dramatic loyalty, or explosive ambition can temporarily impress others, but intensity without consistency usually fades quickly because emotions are unstable by nature. People eventually begin noticing patterns rather than emotional performances. The unsettling part is that many manipulative individuals rely heavily on intensity. They create emotional highs, excessive attention, fast attachment, overwhelming praise, or dramatic displays of loyalty because strong emotions weaken critical thinking. Intensity creates urgency, and urgency often pushes people into trust before consistency has been proven. Consistent individuals operate differently. They do not constantly seek emotional attention because their behavior already speaks for them. They show up repeatedly. Their principles remain stable under pressure. Their actions align over time. This creates a strange psychological effect because consistency slowly becomes difficult to ignore. While intensity burns brightly and disappears, consistency quietly builds authority, trust, and influence. There is also a hidden emotional comfort inside consistency. People feel safer around individuals whose behavior remains grounded because uncertainty naturally creates stress inside the human mind. Someone emotionally unpredictable may appear exciting temporarily, but stable consistency creates deeper long-term respect. The creepiest part is realizing how easily human beings confuse emotional intensity with genuine character. Some people appear powerful simply because they feel overwhelming at first, but over time, the people who quietly earn the deepest respect are usually not the loudest or most dramatic. They are the ones whose discipline remains steady when emotions fade away. Never explain your growth to people committed to misunderstanding you. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that some people do not misunderstand you accidentally. They misunderstand you intentionally because your growth threatens the version of you they felt comfortable controlling, judging, or feeling superior to. The moment you begin changing mentally, emotionally, financially, or spiritually, certain people quietly resist it because your evolution forces them to confront their own stagnation. Human beings naturally create fixed identities for others in their minds. Once someone becomes familiar with a weaker, quieter, insecure, or dependent version of you, they often expect you to remain that way forever. Growth disrupts their emotional comfort. Suddenly, the person they once understood becomes unpredictable, more confident, harder to manipulate, and emotionally independent. This is why explaining yourself repeatedly usually changes nothing. People committed to misunderstanding you are not searching for truth. They are protecting the version of reality that benefits them emotionally. No amount of logic honesty, or emotional explanation can change someone who has already decided who you are in their mind. The disturbing part is that over-explaining growth often comes from the emotional desire to be accepted by people who secretly preferred your old limitations. You try to make them understand your new boundaries, ambitions, mindset, or emotional distance, while they quietly resist every explanation because your growth creates discomfort inside them. Manipulative people especially dislike personal growth because emotionally strong individuals become harder to control. The more self-aware someone becomes, the less guilt, fear, and emotional pressure work on them. The creepiest reality is that some people will continue misunderstanding you no matter how clearly you explain yourself, because misunderstanding you serves their ego better than accepting your transformation. Sometimes silence protects growth better than endless emotional justification ever could. Strategic distance protects emotional clarity. One of the creepiest truths about human relationships is that constant emotional closeness can slowly distort judgment. The more emotionally entangled someone becomes, the harder it often becomes to see manipulation, disrespect, hidden motives, or unhealthy patterns clearly. Emotions create attachment, and attachment can quietly blind people to reality. This is why strategic distance is psychologically powerful. Distance interrupts emotional noise. It allows the mind to observe situations without being constantly influenced by pressure, guilt, attention, charm, or emotional dependency. When people step back emotionally, they often begin noticing things they ignored while emotionally overwhelmed. Human beings are deeply affected by proximity. The people around you influence thoughts, moods, standards, decisions, and emotional stability far more than most realize. Toxic individuals especially rely on constant emotional access because closeness makes manipulation easier. Frequent contact creates familiarity, emotional confusion, and gradual normalization of unhealthy behavior. The disturbing part is that many manipulators become uncomfortable when distance appears. The moment emotional access weakens, their influence weakens too. This is why some people react strongly when you suddenly become quieter, less available, or emotionally detached. Distance threatens psychological control. Emotionally disciplined people understand that not every connection deserves unlimited access to their inner world. Sometimes clarity only appears after stepping away from emotional intensity long enough to think independently again. The creepiest reality is that emotional confusion often disappears the moment distance is created. Patterns become obvious. Disrespect becomes clearer. Manipulation becomes easier to recognize. What once felt emotionally complicated suddenly becomes painfully simple. Strategic distance is not always about abandoning people. Sometimes it is about protecting your mind from emotional chaos long enough to hear your own thoughts again. And in a world where many people constantly influence emotions, opinions, and decisions, emotional distance quietly becomes a form of psychological self-protection, become valuable in ways people cannot easily replace. One of the creepiest truths about human relationships is that people often treat others based on how replaceable they believe they are. Human beings naturally protect what feels rare, useful, emotionally grounding, or difficult to find again. This is why truly valuable individuals are remembered differently. Their absence creates emotional, practical, or psychological gaps that cannot easily be filled. Most people try to gain importance through attention, popularity, or temporary charm, but those things fade quickly because they are common. Real influence comes from developing qualities that become deeply difficult to replace over time. Emotional stability, loyalty, competence, wisdom, creativity, reliability, discipline, and genuine understanding create a form of value that many people secretly depend on without openly admitting it. The disturbing part is that people often realize someone's true value only after losing access to it. Familiarity blinds people. They become comfortable with consistent support, calmness, intelligence, or presence until it disappears. Only then does the emotional weight of absence fully reveal itself. Emotionally intelligent people focus less on impressing others and more on becoming genuinely impactful. They quietly develop skills, emotional depth, self-control, and rare qualities that separate them from superficial connections. Over time, this creates psychological significance because human beings naturally become attached to what improves their life consistently. Manipulative individuals understand this principle too. Some intentionally position themselves as emotional rescuers, providers, advisors, or protectors to create dependence. Once someone feels they cannot easily replace you, emotional influence becomes stronger. The creepiest reality is that irreplaceability often operates silently. People may never openly confess how much they rely on your presence, energy, guidance, or stability. But the moment you disappear, the emotional shift becomes obvious. In a world filled with temporary people, becoming deeply valuable creates a kind of quiet power that cannot easily be ignored or forgotten. Never compete for approval in shallow environments. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that shallow environments reward performance more than authenticity. In places driven by ego, appearance, status, trends, popularity, or constant validation, people are often judged not by depth of character, but by how entertaining, impressive, useful, or socially acceptable they appear in the moment. This creates a dangerous psychological trap. Many people slowly begin changing themselves just to survive socially in environments that were never designed to value their real identity in the first place. They seek approval from emotionally empty people, compete for attention in superficial spaces, and sacrifice authenticity just to feel temporarily accepted. The disturbing part is that shallow environments constantly move the goalpost. No amount of approval is ever enough, because validation in these spaces is unstable and conditional. Today, people praise you. Tomorrow, they ignore you. Human attention in shallow environments is often based on trends, convenience, entertainment, or social advantage rather than genuine respect. Manipulative individuals thrive in these spaces because emotional depth becomes rare. Image matters more than integrity. Confidence matters more than honesty. Attention matters more than character. This is why many shallow social circles quietly reward arrogance, emotional performance, fake lifestyles, or strategic personas while ignoring sincerity completely. Emotionally intelligent people eventually realize that competing for approval in shallow environments slowly destroys inner peace. The more someone depends on external validation, the more emotionally controlled they become by the opinions of people who often do not genuinely care about them at all. The creepiest reality is that shallow environments can slowly make people lose themselves without noticing it. They begin performing instead of living, impressing instead of connecting, chasing visibility instead of meaning. People who stop competing for shallow approval often appear detached or mysterious because they no longer allow emotionally empty spaces to determine their self-worth, identity, or sense of value. Learn to control facial expressions during conflict. One of the creepiest truths about human psychology is that your face often reveals emotions before your words ever do. Fear, anger, insecurity, guilt, frustration, anxiety, and emotional weakness can appear in tiny facial reactions that most people do not consciously notice but still subconsciously detect. During conflict, these expressions quietly shape how others perceive your emotional state and how much control they believe they have over you. Human beings are naturally wired to study faces for emotional information. From ancient survival instincts, people learned to read danger, confidence, deception, and vulnerability through subtle expressions. This is why emotionally reactive faces often give others psychological leverage without realizing it. A nervous smile, widened eyes, clenched jaw, or visible frustration can instantly expose internal emotional chaos. The disturbing part is that manipulative people pay very close attention to these reactions. They watch carefully for signs of discomfort, insecurity, guilt, or emotional instability because facial expressions reveal when pressure is working. Once they notice emotional cracks, they often push harder. Emotionally disciplined individuals understand that conflict is not only verbal, it is psychological. Calm facial control creates uncertainty because it removes emotional information others expect to see. When someone cannot easily read your fear, anger, or emotional pain, they lose part of their ability to predict and influence your reactions. This is why calm people often appear intimidating during confrontation. Their expressions remain steady while others become visibly emotional. Their composure silently communicates self-control, confidence, and emotional resistance. The creepiest reality is that many conflicts escalate not because of words, but because emotions become visibly contagious through facial reactions. Human beings mirror emotional energy instinctively. Learning facial control does not mean suppressing humanity or becoming emotionless. It means refusing to let temporary emotions expose your inner state completely during moments when others may be searching for weaknesses to exploit.